I had to print a novel to get ready for this meeting. Hi, Dan.
Hi, Beth. How are you?
Doing good. How are you?
Good, good, good.
There's the other Dan.
Good afternoon. I'd like to call to order the Public Works, Finance, and Safety Committee meeting of Monday, August 3rd, 2020. Roll call, please.
Albertson,
Here.
Bueller,
Here.
Hoyer,
Here.
Pauline, Lallam,
Here.
Manti,
Here.
Rademski,
Here.
Roby,
Here.
Vilhauer,
Here.
Y.
Present.
Thank you.
All right, we do have a quorum in the room, so we won't have to do roll call vote for every single item. First item on the agenda is approval of the consent agenda.
So
Have a motion by Lalem and a second by Hoyer.
Second.
Any conversation, discussion? All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Item 4 is public input, and this is the time set aside for anyone who would like to make a public comment to step forward and do so. Is there anyone that would like to make a public comment? All right, seeing no one, we'll move on. The next item is approval of the agenda, and I would like to move item C to come just before item F, so that we're talking about the same things at the same time. So with that, is there a motion to approve the agenda?
Motion.
Have a motion by Rademski,
Second.
second by Hoyer. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those
Aye.
opposed signify by saying
Aye.
nay. Motion carries. All right, we're on to the regular agenda, and item A is approval of the bid award for the Animal Care Building, Bramble Park Zoo, project number 2029, to Crest Home Builders, Inc., in the amount of $1,407,877. Have a motion by Lalem
Second.
and a second by Hoyer. And I will ask our Park and Rec Director, Terry Kelly, to tell us about this.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council. I'll lead into it. July 9th, we opened bids, and I think we can all take a breath of fresh air that we've finally gotten to this point. If you remember, almost a year, this was an item that we were all nervous about, and we made it happen. So we did open bids on July 9th. We did assign a project manager within the city, which is Justin Peterson, our assistant city engineer. He's been a great help to me to go through the numbers, be part of the bid process. Dan Miller is also online, but at this point, I will turn it over to Justin to really review the numbers. So Justin, if you would go ahead.
Thanks, TK. Just kind of, we had 3 bidders, and Crestone was a low bid. The engineer's estimate was right at the $1.6 million mark, and the bid came in really, really well. And so we're at a little over 1.4 million with the base bid and 4 alternates. The alternate number 1 is on the west side. The base bid was a steel finish, and the alternate number 1 is more of a exterior finish, so that it's a little bit more protective on that side where there's going to be traffic. The alternate number 2 is the public restroom area, which was kind of a good plus, and we got a good bid on that one. There's some alternate number 3 and alternate number 4. In the base bid, there were areas that were gravel, and those 2 become concrete paving, and those are on the west side. Again, where there's going to be quite a bit of traffic from the staff. So the base bid, there's about $1.4 million. Some additional costs for the project include architectural service from TSP, totaling about almost $886,000. There's some soil testing, about $5,000, and then there's some security and fencing and IT stuff that totals up to be about $91,000. And all told, the total project cost is sitting at about 1.59 million, just under the 1.7 million budget.
Great, thank you. And what's the substantial completion date?
I may jump in. I believe we gave him 1 year. I believe July 1, Mayor.
Okay. And,
For substantial completion would be July 15.
okay, very good. And I'm just going to add in there, I think the community knows this, but we're able to build the animal care building because of a very generous $1 million donation from an anonymous donor just for this purpose. And that money is currently in the city coffers. So we thank our donor for making this possible for us.
And Mayor, can I interject?
Sure.
I appreciate you not getting pulled over or like mugged on your way from the zoo to the vault. So I just want to make that known that you were a brave soul to drive that check over. So
Yeah, I was trying to get here as quickly as possible while not drawing attention to myself. Are there any questions or comments from the council? Councilman Billhauer?
I know the Lake Area Zoological Society has discussed this, but I guess I'd like to have just a brief discussion as to the need for alternate number 2 as far as a family restroom. If someone could speak to that, please.
I would refer to Dan Miller, who's online with us on that.
Well, I guess we felt that the restroom needed to be there. A lot of times we have kids that are playing in the Dino Land area, or up by the wolves, or up by the kangaroos area, and what they do is they go to the bathroom in the main building and then leave the zoo. We felt that was a good location for that family bathroom, and we think it's needed.
Does that answer your question well enough?
Yes, it does. Thanks, Dan.
Okay.
Anyone else? Councilman Roby?
I happen to notice that too. Why are bathrooms so expensive?
Quiet. I will lean on the engineering staff for that answer. And before Gus jumps in, but Councilman Roby, we've seen this with foundation field restrooms, complex restrooms. They seem the square footage prices. It seems high, but it seems standard that those are the price per square foot we are paying for outdoor restrooms. Even McKinley Park restroom, I believe, we are right around $70,000 for that. But that seems to be the market value. And Justin, you've been a lot of projects involved with restrooms. Maybe you can add in.
Yeah, the engineer's estimate was right around 70,000, so it was pretty close to what we'd expect.
All right. Any other comments or questions? Okay, then I'll look for action. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed signify by saying nay. Anyone abstaining? See not, motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item B.
Thank you, everybody. I appreciate it so much.
You bet. Thank you, guys. Item B is approval of the construction change order number 2, final, with bituminous paving for the 2018 seal coating, project number 1815, for a decrease of $8,781.70. Motion by Holeen and a second by Rademski. And I will ask the Public Works Director, Heath Von Eye, to tell us about this one.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, we have a final change order brought before the council here this evening to wrap up this project from 2018. This is the 2018 chip seal project. If you recall, it included several areas of town, but some of the areas of focus that caused this to drag out a little longer were in the downtown area along Kemp Avenue and 2nd Street. After having some issues with materials and the chip seal not performing like it should on the initial application, the contractor came back and did some remedial work, some work that we had required them to do on doing a reapplication of the chip seal on a certain number of blocks in the downtown area. A good majority of that chip seal did perform well, And then, however, during the end of their application of that rework, some adverse weather had hit the project and also caused some issues that they again had to work through and address. So that's what's caused the time delay on getting this project closed out. I can say that Bituminous Paving has been very amicable to work with in correcting what they can on the project. They did clean the storm sewer systems in relation to that storm event that happened. Some of the oil had washed down the storm sewer system and needed to be mitigated and cleaned up. They made one attempt at that. We, through our internal resources, inspected that, actually televised the inside of that storm sewer system with the wastewater division's equipment, and had to have them make a second pass at that work, and so they did. They brought in third-party resources to vector out with a high-pressure jetting system as much of that material as they could. So the storm sewer system, we felt, got cleaned up and is back into orderly condition so that component was taken care of. The chip seal performance itself, we feel is fine. The street superintendent, Rob Bainan, myself, the assistant city engineers, 2 of them now, have all looked at this and been part of this with Bituminous Paving. And we feel that it's performing as well as it should for this application. The one thing I will note is that everybody can see is there is still some remnants of the washed away tar material on the face of some of the curbing in the downtown area. We did talk heavily and extensively with Bituminous Paving about that issue, and we actually had their crews and our internal street crews try to mitigate that as well, to no avail. We tried some acid-based, citric-based acid type of remover that's usually works well in scrubbing off a material like this. We used the steel brushes on the street sweeper to try to physically brush it off. The contractor had some other attempts at trying to get it off. What it boiled down to is that we feel over time, when something like this does happen, over time, time's the best remedy for a situation like this to allow that to wear off. And we weren't finding a means that was working effectively to get the contractor to remove that. So what the change order before the council tonight is an actual decrease of $8,781.70. And that was just one final bow out from the contractor to offer that funds back to us just for the trouble and the work we've had to go through to mitigate the items that they have throughout the project. So that's why it's a net decrease on the change order. And Justin's online, and here I can help answer any questions.
All right, thank you. Questions, council? Michael Hoyer?
Heath, I'm just curious, how exactly did we come up with that number?
That is the amount of retainage left that would otherwise be paid out to the contractor.
Okay, and then with that being the case, the ones that did fail, did they reach a certain point where we're just like, this is going to be the best it's going to get, and we're just going to go with it for now, or is there a remedy to get it back up to what it should have been?
So the material on the surfacing, we don't feel that the surface of the roadway is being compromised at all. The chip seal we feel is fine and adequate as far as that is concerned.
Okay, sounds good. And looking at Kemp and everything, I mean, I would say it looks solid. It's a pretty good surface compared to some of our other roads. So, thank you.
Councilman Lala?
Heath, how did they go about, how much residue was in the storm sewers, and how did they go about remedying that?
Yeah, in the storm sewer, there was quite a bit of tar material in there, and they had a Vactor truck out there, and those Vactor trucks, they're those really noisy trucks that have, what they are is like a big vacuum. And they had that down in the catch basins to suck all the tar and muck up out of the catch basin itself. But then they also run a jetter hose down the storm sewer pipe, and so when that hose is down there, it sends high pressure water out through that hose, and then extracts the material as it comes off the walls of the pipe, and that Vactor part of the truck is sucking all that material up as well. So high pressure water and Vactoring the system is essentially what they had to do multiple times to get the system cleaned out.
And that was billed directly to the contractor then?
Yeah, the contractor covered those costs fully.
Okay, was that material solid surface at that point, or was it still semi-liquid?
Well, when they first approached remedying the situation, it did have a little tackiness to it yet. And then they found as it cured and dried out, it broke off easier and came off a little better that way. So
That didn't get into our groundwater or anything, did it?
you know, not that we traced and found as far as the outfall of the storm sewer system. We didn't have any reports of that or any indications that it went that far through the system.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? All right, I'll look for action. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Anyone opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. We're going to skip to item D, authorization for the mayor to sign the joint powers agreement with Watertown Municipal Utilities and the South Dakota Department of Transportation, SDDOT, for work associated with the Highway 212 Phase 2 reconstruction project and all applicable documents associated with the Highway 212 Phase 2 reconstruction project.
So moved.
Have a motion by Vilhauer and a second by Lallam. And I'll ask the Public Works Director to tell us about this again.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So as the council may recall, we entered into a similar agreement back with Phase 1 of the Highway 212 reconstruction project. This agreement before the council tonight is essentially has the same effect for the upcoming for the upcoming Phase 2 reconstruction of Highway 212. They do, the DOT is anticipating bidding out and constructing some storm sewer improvements in 2021, but the brunt of the improvements with this agreement are related to the full 212 reconstruction that's going to begin in 2022 construction season. So some of the main highlights on here is that the city is responsible for any storm sewer upgrades on our system, in relation to tying into the improvements that they'll be making with their system on the storm sewer. The other component here that this agreement is related to is the realignment of the 14th Street, the north leg of the 14th Street intersection. As you recall, that's where we will be relocating, the DOT will be relocating the 13th Street traffic signal to 14th. And with that traffic signal relocation, they're also performing a realignment of the north leg of that intersection, so it lines up more evenly with the south leg that leads down to the Hy-V access. That's another large part of this agreement. And then we're doing a little bit of horse trading here, where we're going to provide manhole covers for the sanitary sewer manholes at no cost to the DOT, while the DOT will be installing fencing at the Roby Creek outfall at no cost to the city. That'll be similar decorative fencing as what we used along Phase 1 of the project. I believe there's an outfall or detention area near Taco John's. If you drive by that area, you'll see some black, a little more decorative fencing that went in there. And so this fencing will be south of 11th Street and out in front of the Montgomery's furniture area. There's a large run of chain link fence that's there now today, and they'll be upgrading that with this project. The agreement also notes the intent of the DOT installing cul-de-sacs at 5th Avenue and 6th Avenue, eliminating those two streets' connection with Highway 212. We have met with, we have met with some concerned landowners along the 5th Avenue corridor where that cul-de-sac would be constructed. The DOT is going to continue conversations with those business owners and discuss the details as they proceed with right-of-way procurement and things of that nature. So with that, the staff has reviewed this, the city attorney's reviewed the agreement, and all are here tonight in recommendation for approval.
All right, thank you. The storm sewer part, obviously we don't have a bid yet, and so they don't know what their cost is going to be. It's based upon their estimate. Is that true? Or is that going to change? Any of these numbers going to change when we get a bid?
Yeah, Justin, if I could defer to the assistant city engineer, he worked through some of these numbers in detail. Justin, do you have an answer to that question?
Yeah, these numbers are based on estimates. I'm not certain if they change after the bid, but the comparison was done based on estimates and the size that the DOT ran through their analysis.
Okay, thank you. Council, do you have any questions or comments about it? Councilman Billhauer?
Couple of questions. First of all, I assume this has been budgeted. These estimated costs have been budgeted
We,
or built into our budget somehow.
we would not have had these budget numbers when we put together the recent 2021 budget, but yes, you can bet they will be.
Okay.
And I believe Kristen's online here with us tonight too, but that's something I'll be getting with her on and making sure we can account for accordingly.
And another question is, I know we've talked about 17th Street and 19th Street intersections as well. I think that was still kind of up in the air, as I recall from our last conversation on that. There's no reference to either one of those intersections in this agreement. Is that, I mean, by design or intentional, or is there something more coming yet, or where are we at with that, Heath?
As far as 17th goes, the DOT is not anticipating any modifications to that
Okay.
that part of the Highway 212 route, and then the same as 19th Street. They're anticipating just building that back as it is.
Okay.
If you recall here, about a month ago, we spoke to you about potentially repaving 19th Street with their project, in conjunction with their project. They've since replied to us. Initially thought that'd be a good idea, they could work that in, but now after looking at their scheduling for phase 2, they think it's going to be a little too tight to incorporate any paving of 19th with their work. So what will happen there is once they complete the storm sewer improvements under 19th Street next year, they'll patch that back in with asphalt, meeting our patching specifications that we'd like to see for urban streets.
Okay. And then just a comment. I know it's a DOT project, but, and I raised this point once before, over the weekend, somebody asked me, well, that project's going forward next year, right? I said, no, it's been delayed to 2022. That word is not getting out there adequately, so whatever we could do as a city to help promote, to help get that word out, because there's still a lot of people think it's going to happen next year.
Absolutely.
There is a component of it that will occur next year, though.
Yeah.
But not what people are anticipating, though.
They'll see some activity, and it just won't be the paving part.
I think if we as a city could get a little more information out to the public would be helpful.
Yeah, and you're right, they will see some activity, and that activity will primarily be on the easterly end and the westerly end of the project for the storm sewer improvements that they're going to install. And yeah, if the public doesn't have that notice, they're probably going to wonder when the rest of the work's going to happen when they see that bit going on. So we can do what we can on our end, Councilman Vilhauer, to help with that.
Councilman Lallam?
Heath, to that point, maybe we could put out what they are actually going to be doing next year. You know, I think to Glenn's point, and I've had people ask us, I think they're envisioning the entire roadway being tore up, and that's not what's gonna happen, so. If they're doing storm sewer improvements or something along those lines, we just put that out there, this is gonna be done in 2021, and the big process will go in 2022. But we are at the mercy of the DOT as well on that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Any other questions or comments? Councilman Roby?
What is going to happen at the 17th Street intersection?
I anticipate that will go back pretty much how it is today, aside from, you know, the widening effect that you'll see on 212. But the same stop-controlled situation that exists there now today. I'll defer to Justin. Justin, if you have any more detail on that one, to chime in on 17th. Do you know of anything different that they propose now to date?
I'm not aware of anything different.
Okay.
Just an additional comment, you know, we do have an issue there with the turn lane and the entrance on the other side of the street being so close. They're offset some, and what you get is those head-to-head potentials, and I've seen them, I've been in them, where neither party can turn, so that issue won't go away.
They might be altering driveway locations. Have we seen plans? Because it's a driveway on the north side, and a road on the south side, right?
Yeah.
So there's a possibility that they're aware of that, and they have the authority to regulate where those driveways come out. So they might realign that a little bit.
Would you ask that question? Just because that shift, I think, would help a lot. What you get is all that athletic traffic coming out of there. And the one across the street and slightly to the east is the Runnings entrance.
Absolutely.
Those are the ones that if they did move that might go a long way to help that.
Yeah, that's a great point, Councilman Roby. We do have some preliminary plans. We can look at those and see if they've made any modifications to those driveways to the north. If they haven't, we'll definitely bring that issue up to
Yeah,
them.
and they're
'Cause there's
they're
still plenty
usually
of
all
time
over
to
that.
do that.
They want to correct those kind of issues as they come up. Councilman Lallam?
To that same point, to the one to the west of that is the entrance for the Cenex Car Wash there as well. That's not that far of a distance either. I think they're probably halfway between the two of them. You know, and I know there's a lot of people that try to turn to the east out of that parking lot as well, so. You know, I think it's a bottleneck that happens there between two businesses that are going different directions.
Yeah, we will look into that and see if, what's being proposed and whether there's any additional consideration they could give to it.
All right. Any other questions or comments? Not seeing any, I'll look for action. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Somebody's really faint. Is that Bruce? Bruce, can you say hello?
Hello?
Okay, I could hear you there. Just want to make sure we hear your voice.
Okay.
All right. Item E is approval of a professional services agreement for on-call engineering services with Infrastructure Design Group, Inc. in the amount of up to $50,000 to be performed on a task order basis throughout the 2020 fiscal year, and authorizing the mayor to sign all applicable documents. Have a motion by Lallam.
Second.
And a second by Vilhauer. And Heath, will you explain this, please?
Yes, Mayor, thank you. Again, if the council recalls, last year, we actually entered into a similar agreement with Infrastructure Design Group, a local consulting firm here in Watertown, where we wanted to have a professional services contract with them on a task order basis for engineering services. We're at that point needing that again this year. We've had a lot of staff turnover in the engineering office recently, and we currently have 2 vacant engineering technician positions. One of those positions is filled, and the new employee will be starting in the middle of August. The second one is being advertised as we speak to get that filled. In the meantime, we do have a need for some surveying and work of that nature that IDG is able to provide us. And so that's what this agreement in part is for, to help with some immediate needs and then any upcoming needs here throughout the rest of the year for engineering services or surveying.
All right, thank you. Councilman Lallam?
Heath, we did this last year as well. Any idea of that amount? How much was utilized so far?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't have that number off the top of my head. I know it, I don't believe it was anywhere near the limit, if I remember right, but I'd have to look and get back to you on that.
Okay, I do believe this was basically a place order in case we have outside items that need to be reviewed a little quicker, that we have a contract in place, correct?
Yeah, exactly.
Same dollar amount as last year,
I
correct?
believe it was, yes. And Justin, I defer to him too. He wrote this up in relation to last year's. Do you know off the top of your head, Justin, the answer to those questions?
I was looking that up. I think it was right around 15, 20,000. I think it was about 15,000 last year.
15.15. Correct?
1.5, yep.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions or comments? All right, I'll look for action. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. We're going to jump back to item C, which is approval of a quote award for the East Woods Drainage Improvements, project number 1523, to Deutsch Excavating LLC in the amount of $74,988.95. Have a motion by Lallam and a second by Holene. Heath, want to tell us about this, please?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. This, I will first point out the fact that it is a quote. For the council's information, the South Dakota bid laws were recently amended here this year and went into effect on July 1st. The ability for municipalities to quote up to a larger amount of work, up to $100,000, or just under that at $99,999. So we proceeded with this project knowing where our estimate was on putting out requests for quotes from contractors. And the assistant city engineer worked and disseminated this information to a good handful of contractors. We did, however, only receive one quote back, but it was a good one in comparison with the engineer's estimate. That quote was received by Deutsch Excavating, LLC, and in the amount of just shy of $75,000. The engineer's estimate was about $100,000, and so staff is making recommendation for approval of this. And this work relates to the self-named Cherry Creek drainage issues. It's not technically called Cherry Creek, but that's what we've been calling it because it's related to drainage issues that are coming off of Cherry Drive in that neighborhood of town. And so this Eastwoods Drainage Improvements Project will be regrading that area where it immediately discharges off Cherry Drive and flows to the west. And then a little bit of regrading will occur down around the bend where it curves to the south and then flows south from there in the city's drainage property. I would want to point out that this grading project is anticipated to help with the conveyance of water through there. What exists there today is been some excavated, a length of it has been excavated, where I think it was attempted to provide some positive drainage through that area. But the excavation ceased more or less and kind of created a trough effect where there's standing water for a certain depth, for a certain length in this drainage area. I'd also remind the council that we are working in a jurisdictional wetland, that we've already received permits from the Corps of Engineers to proceed with this work. And the finished product, we hope, helps accomplish some more positive grading and drainage through this area. But I will advise, too, that it is a drainage area, and it's very likely that, especially in wet years, we could still see some reed growth and cattail growth, depending on the availability and access to the area due to moisture constraints with the mowing equipment and things of that nature. So we do think it's a step in the right direction to help remedy what's there now, and are looking forward to moving forward with the project at the contractor's availability, which to my understanding is after September 1st with a completion date of October 2nd, I believe it was. So we should have it all wrapped up here yet this fall.
Great, thank you. Questions from the council? Councilman Lallam?
So they're talking about on theirs to seed it as well. We probably would not have any seed or growth really till next year, judging by that October date on that, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. It's likely most of that would come next spring and through next summer. We actually, thank you for mentioning that, Councilman Lallam. We actually have a pretty well designed and laid out seeding plan, vegetative plan to put back in this area that one of our consultants from quite some time ago actually put together for us.
So what are our guarantees on that if it does not take, say, next spring? I mean, are we going back to the contractor on that, or are we kind of stuck on our own on that?
Yeah, there would be, just like any contractual work, there would be some warranty type of remedies that we could apply to the contractor if need be.
Okay. I feel like I probably should have let Don, make the motion on this one.
No, it's a great project that we're glad to have a quote in front of the council for consideration to move forward with. And
Are there other comments or questions? Councilman Billhauer?
I haven't been following as closely as my colleague to the right here, but I assume that this work will now incorporate or also handle whatever development is happening immediately to the, north and east of there?
that's another great question, Councilman Vilhauer. I'm glad you brought that up because contrary to what we originally hoped, this will be a standalone city project. We were unable to coordinate with the developer to the north due to their timeline of their project. That project, that development has been put on hold. But we do believe that we can still proceed with this grading and work within the confines of the city property and not affect the property to the north. So it will be a standalone city project.
So I guess that means any runoff from those projects eventually will still funnel through this drainage, or is that going to be dealt with separately?
So the development to the north was required to provide and design detention and water quality BMPs. And so most of their runoff would likely get channeled through their own on-site BMPs before running off onto the city's property.
Okay, thanks, Heath.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments?
Motion to approve.
All right, we already, yeah, we had a motion already, but, sorry, Don. Yeah, just yell it, yeah. Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries.
I
All right,
just wanted
thank
to
you.
add that we must have this remote meeting thing down pat, because as fast as I write down a question, somebody there asks it. So we're doing really well on that.
Very good. All right, item F is approval of a professional services agreement for services associated with the 2020 Eastwoods Drainway Project number 1523 with Austin Engineering, Inc. in the amount of $2,495, authorizing the mayor to sign all applicable documents. Don, would you like to make a motion?
So moved.
Have a motion by Roby and a second by Holleen. And I will ask the city engineer, Public Works Director Heath Von Eye to tell us about it.
Thanks, Mayor. So this is obviously in connection with the previous action item. This relates to the engineering services that we are wanting to procure from Austin Engineering. Austin helped us out. They were great in partnering with us. They were representing the landowner to the north, the developer to the north at the time, and worked through some design iterations with us and how that would tie into the property to the north. We then subsequently worked with them on our submittals to the Corps of Engineers, and the documents that Austin produced were what was provided to the Corps of Engineers for our permitting. So this agreement helps wrap up some of the payment due from those design services, but then goes further into the construction phase where they will assist with our staking of the project. They'll provide the digital files to the contractor providing the grading, and also produce some record drawings for the city when the work is completed and do a final survey of the work. All for what I thought was a very reasonable amount, and is why it's before the council with staff recommendation to approve.
All right, thank you. Council, do you have any questions or comments? None. All right, I'll look for action. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Item G is approval of a professional services agreement for services associated with the Watertown Downtown Plaza project, project number 2030, with Confluence in the amount of $173,800, authorizing the mayor to sign all applicable documents.
So moved.
Have a motion by Hoyer.
Second.
I think that was Hoyer, and a second by Lallam. And I'll ask Public Works Director Heath Von Eye to explain this, please.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I will share my screen here. I will try to share my screen. And in the council packet, there is a diagram that is part of the proposal from Confluence. So this project relates to the downtown park, or what might otherwise become known as Foundation Park, or something yet to be named formally. As council's full well aware, we've received donated monies from the Watertown Community Foundation to help fund this project. The Watertown Development Company has been working with Confluence on a conceptual basis to provide a concept of what this downtown park might look like. And now we're to the point where the Watertown Development Company is more or less wanting to pass the project off to city engineering staff and to work with the design consultant to wrap up the design phase of this project. And that's what this contract before the council tonight entails, are the contractual services for the design of the downtown park. This contract is with Confluence. They do have a team that they work with and will be working with throughout the design of this project, but our contract will be solely with Confluence. And we've reviewed the numbers and everything appears to be in line, and I know John Jacobson from Confluence is actually online with us here this evening, and I'll let you speak to the contract if you'd like to, John.
Thank you, Heath, and thank you, Council, for giving us a few minutes here tonight to talk about this project. I guess we've had a few preliminary meetings with city staff and a few council representatives. The one thing that I want to state about this proposed agreement is that the conceptual plan that he showed you is just that. It needs to be vetted in more detail based on wants and needs from the city and stakeholder groups. So depending upon certain operation decisions that are made, those types of things, I foresee the overall design of the plaza park space changing over time to become more personalized and accommodating. Also, as we continue to get more information about some of the private redevelopment projects that surround the plaza park space, we'll have to adjust accordingly as well. So we've got a good team put together that includes infrastructure design group, which would be the civil engineer and do all the surveying work. Mettler Sickmiller Engineering, who would be the electrical engineering company, firm out of Missouri called Hydrodramatics, which will help us with the water feature design. And then Rise Structural Associates will help us with structural engineering oriented task items like the proposed stage and pavilion structure. And then lastly, Co-op Architecture, who will be assisting us with the stage and shelter structure as well. So this proposal will run through the formation of the final schematic design to make sure the program is what you want to see it to be. Then we will run through design development of the project, continue to refine it, eventually producing a set of bid documents which will be sent out to contractors, obviously along with our anticipated costs, and then bidding of the project. So that's where this agreement ends. And then the potential future costs as far as coordinating if the city decides to accept bids and selects a contractor, any construction administration costs will have to be discussed at that time. And it's something typically we like to reserve for the future, just depending upon how much of the CA the city engineering staff feels that it would like to do, and what other sort of responsibilities that we're going to have. So we feel good about this proposal, and we look forward to progressing on this project.
All right, thank you. So, do we have any questions from the council for John or for Heath? Councilman Billhauer?
Just want to clarify, John or Heath, I think you said it plainly, but I want to make sure it's understood. The engineering firms that you referenced in the design phase here, those fees are included as part of the fee that we are acting on tonight, correct?
Yes, sir. Those fees are, all the subcontractors are included as part of our proposal.
Thank you.
Councilman Holleen?
Thank you, Mayor. This isn't really a question, but a comment. Would that be appropriate at this time? I want to thank everyone for the work that they've done for the Downtown Plaza project. As most everyone up here knows, I've not been a proponent of it, My opposition to it has softened over time, in part due to the very good work done, like in this presentation, and the mayor, public works director, everyone. I want to applaud you for that. My opposition tonight will just be based solely upon the uncertainty of the city budget in lieu of COVID and spending money on a want versus a need. I'm just reluctant to do that at this time, so I will continue to vote no on this project.
All right, thank you. I think it warrants being said that the council has approved the urban renewal plan and the urban renewal assessment, and the money that's collected from the assessment every year will go completely toward this park project. And if we don't start construction by the end of 2021, we have to give the money back for the assessment. So.
Thank you, Mayor, and I'm aware of that, but since I voted against the urban renewal tax, I will stay on the opposition of this.
All right, thank you. Any other questions or comments? All right, seeing none, I'll look for action. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed signify by saying nay. No. I should probably do a roll call vote in case there were more than one nay. So, Kristen? Oh, it's hard to tell.
Albertson? Bueller?
Aye.
Hoyer?
Aye.
Pauline?
No.
Lallam?
Aye.
Manti?
Aye.
Rademski?
Aye.
Roby?
Aye.
Bill Howard?
Aye.
Why?
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right, thank you. The next item on the agenda is old business, and we have item A, discussion of 10th Avenue North reconstruction project. And I'll ask the city engineer, public works director, Heath Von Eye, to explain this. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I asked that this be on for old business and discussion. I wanted to circle back with the council and provide a little bit of an update on public open house that was held last Tuesday evening in relation to this project. This is the 10th Avenue reconstruct that's being proposed for next year. We're currently in the design phase of this project at a roughly 50% design being complete. And we had a good open house, a good representation of the homeowners and landowners adjacent to this route. This project extends from 4th Street Northwest easterly all the way over to Highway 81. So it's roughly about 3,200 feet, about 9 blocks of reconstruction that's being proposed. And we were able to share some of the preliminary design plans with the homeowners at this meeting we had last week. And then there were a few questions I was going to circle back with the council on that I had some follow-up information to provide. One of those questions was the sidewalk assessment process and what the homeowners would be responsible to replace. One of the specific questions was related to if a homeowner has a small area of sidewalk that's non-conforming or not in good condition, if they would just be assessed the charges for that portion of their sidewalk. I've confirmed in discussions with the mayor and some of the practices that we've done in the past that yes, in fact, that's exactly how we would anticipate proceeding in those situations, and only assessing the homeowner for the slab or the 2 slabs of sidewalk that are causing a trip hazard or nonconformities with the ADA requirements. So that point I wanted to clarify tonight to the council. The other point I misspoke on based on some research that we have done in the engineering office regarding the irrigation and whether that would be covered under the city's portion of the project or whether that would be the homeowner's responsibility. At the meeting I stated that it would likely be the homeowner's responsibility to pay for any irrigation repairs. But doing further research again with the mayor outside of the meeting and looking back on other projects, that is a cost that we feel that I would make a recommendation to council that we would cover under the city's cost because it is our widening of our street that's going to be getting into these boulevard areas that oftentimes have private irrigation in them. It has been a common practice of ours to go ahead and replace that irrigation, repair that irrigation in the boulevard area at the city's expense. Aside from those two notes, I wanted to mention that we are having upcoming one-on-one meetings with the property owners starting, I believe, as soon as this Thursday is what we're trying to get scheduled. And we're staff and our consultant are anticipating scheduling a full day for 3 consecutive weeks, 1 day this week, another day next week, and then a third day the third week. And we hope to have time to sit down and visit with each and every homeowner, talk in detail about what's being impacted on their property specifically. We're hoping to have the sidewalk inspections done by those meetings so we can relate to them what they may or may not be assessed for sidewalk improvements. And then we'll also talk through in more detail some of the specifics of the project and how it may or may not impact their driveway configurations and things of that nature. So I just wanted to let the council be aware of that. And one thing about those meetings, it'll be information gathering on the city's part. We'll be taking in information, concerns from each and every property owner along this route and noting their concerns in relation to the street section that's being proposed, the number of people that have concerns with parking or the number of people that really want to see parking. We'll assess all that information and compile it and then circle back to the council to look at any potential design alterations that we may want to make before we get much further into the process.
Yes, Councilman Holeen.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Heath, for mentioning that parking issue. Like everyone else up here, I've heard from quite a few homeowners going to be impacted by that. I can see the need for revamping that thoroughfare because the numbers that you have provided for us show that it is one of the busiest in all of Watertown. And because it is one of the busiest, I question why we would even have parking on that thoroughfare. I can see the need for the turning lane and for the better road, but to have parking on top of that seems like I would not want kids coming out of the car on that road going to Highland Park or something like that. And it would also perhaps alleviate some of the homeowners' concerns about taking maybe a little bit less of their land. So I would encourage you to at least consider that alteration.
We're not taking anyone's land. It's all in the public right-of-way, but Heath, if you would please touch on the standard street that we've adopted in our design standard and whether or not that incorporates parking within it.
Yes, absolutely. So to both those points, we do have 66 feet of right-of-way that exists out there today. And from the start, we've instructed our consultant to do what they can to design these improvements completely within the existing right-of-way to avoid having to procure any land from anybody. And so the design as it's put together today does just that. It has everything included with this new street width, all falling within the current right-of-way. So that's a good thing that we're minimizing the impact on the property owners that way. The street section for a collector, that's what 10th Avenue is classified as a collector route. There's 3 classifications, an arterial, a collector, and a local, generally speaking. That they do dive down into further classifications from there, but generally speaking, there's those 3. 10th Avenue is, we found to be the 6th highest traveled roadway in our community on a vehicle per day traffic volume basis. And if you think in comparison of what else might be out there, you have 19th Street East, you have 14th Avenue North, there's portions of 1st Avenue North and Willow Creek Drive, portions of 20th Avenue South along the bypass route between Highway 20 and 81, and then portions of 4th Avenue Southwest that rate higher than 10th, but then 10th falls 6th in line with traffic volumes. And so when you have a collector with traffic volumes just shy of 5,000 vehicles per day that falls into a certain design category in our engineering design standards that requires a minimum of 41 feet street width. So we've worked through those through that information and through those iterations of how wide to make this. We've landed on a 45-foot street width for a couple different reasons. One, because it accommodates a parking lane on the south, 2 through lanes, and a center turn lane. And that 45-foot street width accommodates that rather nicely. And then it also makes it a congruent street width from what exists west of the hospital all the way through east then to Highway 81. So if the parking is not a desired feature from the residents, that is definitely something that, we can have as a negotiating talking point on whether that's needed or not. We as staff thought that there were several homeowners on the south side who have very limited driveway space, might very well like to see parking come back for not only their own private use, but also for when guests come and go to their residence. And actually, the Green Book, it's known as the Green Book, the generic term of it. It's a geometric design of highways and streets put out by AASHTO, the American Association of State Highway Transportation Officials. And in here, this also is what steers these regulations on how roads are designed. And it does seem a little counterintuitive, but they also do recommend on-street parking when you have a collector going through a residential district. And that actually, I'll be honest, caught me a little bit off guard when I read that in that manual, because it does seem counterintuitive. But when you think about it from the way the perspective they relate it in this manual, is that when you have a collector route going through a residential area, it's important that you still account for the uses that this collector is going through. Those uses being residential, you're going to have guests and family members and visitors coming and going at these residences, and having that on-street parking helps accommodate the use in that zoning district, such as single-family residential in this case. So that doesn't mean that it's a hard, fast requirement. It is a recommendation, and that's where I think some of these one-on-one meetings with the landowners will help us discern who really wants that on-street parking brought back, who really doesn't, and how we could accommodate those desires.
Thank you, Heath. Councilman Hoyer?
I know one of the big concerns that I've seen too, Heath, is just a lot of concern over some of the older trees in those neighborhoods coming out. I know that's kind of a fear. Watertown, of course, we got our designation as a Tree City USA in 2019 for our management of our forestry, but I would just hope that in those one-on-one conversations we talk about what the options are going to be for those folks to restore that tree cover in whatever way we can, whether that be us planting something a little more mature if that's possible, or just where we're going to be with it. It's always hard when we're going through these old neighborhoods and taking out some of those older, larger growth, but I know that was a big concern.
Right. Councilman Lallam?
Heath, I got a couple questions on this. I mean, 41's the requirement for that, 45 is what we're recommending. How much is the parking lane, essentially? I mean, is that 10 feet or?
Parking lane's about 9 feet wide.
9 feet?
Yeah.
Okay, so if the majority of the people in this neighborhood decide they don't want a parking lane, can we adjust that?
Yeah, we could absolutely look at the adjustment of that alignment, that roadway alignment, and how that would fit into that right-of-way section the best.
Because I know there's people up there, and I've had a few of them that reached out to me, with that being my ward, as far as trying to keep some of those trees. And I know you did touch on that at that community meeting, that about half of those roughly are ash trees, and are going to unfortunately have to go either way.
That's correct.
But if it's not a requirement or not a request that's made that we have parking on that, if there's a way that we could, attempt to save as many of those trees as possible to keep the aesthetically pleasing, that road actually looks pretty good for being a very busy road.
Yeah.
I mean, the trees that are there have been there a long time, and they're hard to go through that.
Yeah.
And that would be a way that I think at least the community up there would appreciate if we could keep some of those, and or be able to plant new ones in that boulevard. Where if we go from 8 feet or 10 feet to 4 feet in that boulevard, that's going to make a huge difference as to what they can plant back in. Because at 4 feet, they're probably not going to plant a tree.
Yeah. So to that point, Councilman Lallam, I think the telling part of that will be if we go without parking on the south and we reduce that overall street width to some new width, whether you take 45 minus the 9-foot lane or whatever it ends up being.
Well, even if you go 41.
Yeah, and so how that new alignment will fall in relation to that north boulevard, that's the one that's going to have the most impact with these
Sure.
boulevard trees. Whether we can still minimize that north boulevard widening enough to keep any of those trees, that might be pretty difficult to do. I don't know yet without looking at the realignment, but it might be difficult to do even with narrowing the road. But the good news is we've already had discussions with Park Recs and Forestry Department and our urban planner, who's also specializes in landscape architecture. And we do have some tree planting options that we can come back in if they have to be removed in the boulevard to the north. We do have some tree planting options that can be put into narrower boulevard areas. And those are some of the things that we're talking about internally and trying to figure out as we speak.
The other question I would have on that is, are we going to identify those trees right away, which ones are going to be ash that would have to go no matter what? I mean, I think that would, frankly, that would appease at least me, you know, and knowing which ones are going to come down no matter what. And then if that is done, when would they start to remove those trees? Is that going to be something that they do when they start the construction phase, or are they going to try to take those down, say, this fall yet? You know, those are a couple questions I have.
So as far as identification, we have identified the ash trees. We haven't identified every tree individually, but we did go through and identify the number of ash trees. And you are correct, there's about half of them. There's 60-some trees that are affected and are likely going to have to come out. About half of those, 30-some, are ash trees. So if you can envision, you know, the net effect is there's about 30 trees having to come out that wouldn't have to if it weren't for this project. The other 30 are going to have to regardless because they're ash trees and the emerald ash borer effect that's going to be hitting, you know, communities all around us here in a short manner of time. So as far as our tree management program, those ash would be coming out regardless. The second part of your...
When would they start taking trees down?
Yes, good question there too. We talked with Park and Recs and Forestry on that, and we felt it probably simplest just to include this in the construction of the project. And, you know, they've got limited resources, limited staff, limited equipment. So we anticipate just including that tree removal with the project, and then that would be one of the first items, obviously, come spring of 21, whenever the construction starts, that they would, the contractor's subcontractor would come through and take those trees out at that point in time.
Okay.
Councilman Bueller?
Thank you, Mayor. Just one question regarding sidewalks again. If you have a sidewalk, and I don't know how many sidewalks up there would be short of the standard width, which I think is 5 feet. If someone has a 4-foot wide sidewalk, would that require them to replace that?
No. No, 4 feet is ADA acceptable. We have a higher standard than the ADA, but we were utilizing the ADA standard. Councilman Billhauer?
Heath, I know there was at least one question the other night, and I've had a couple people approach me since that meeting. I think with, as far as safety issues up there, I think there's a perception that with the widening, adding the turning lanes, et cetera, they're actually looking at moving traffic through there faster, or you know, maybe, I guess fast would be the right word I want to use. So I guess speak that a little bit as far as, you know, because there are some concerns about safety. I think there's a daycare center along that stretch that specifically was referenced the other night. You want to speak to that a little bit, Heath?
Yeah, absolutely, Councilman Billhauer. So the goal in our design wouldn't necessarily to be to increase the speed at which the traffic flows through this street section, but more focusing on the community's use of this public right-of-way and optimizing that use in a safe, efficient, and functional manner. And so when you look at any two-lane street, such as this one, some of the components on here that would trigger a left turn lane, for example, that causes the widening all the more. But there's 52 points of access in these 9 blocks. Those include driveways, street intersections, and intersections with alleys. And if you think about that's quite a few points of potential turning movement conflicts in a 9-block stretch of roadway. So hence the logic behind the center turn lane. The other part of that is it being an emergency route to the hospital. Another thing that center turn lane provides is either a point of conveyance or safe maneuvering of either vehicles to get out of the way or the ambulance to get out of the way of vehicles, one or the other. But you know, that's also a consideration that we've been giving this project. So the goal would be, something I touched on in the public open house too, was the lane widths out there today are effectively about 14 feet, which is a pretty wide lane width. Now it's not striped, to be 2 lanes, but that's effectively what you have is 2 lanes that are pretty wide. With the new project, you will have striped lanes at a narrower 11-foot width. And anytime you take those wider lanes and you reduce them down with striping, that inherently becomes a traffic calming measure for most drivers. They recognize that they got a lane next to them, that somebody you might be going around because they're turning in that left center turn lane. And in this case, as it's designed right now, you got parked cars to the right. And so both of those components in a striped, narrower street lane tend to be a traffic calming measure. And I would hope that, you know, and the studies, I think, prove that those don't actually necessarily promote faster traffic. That's obviously a possibility depending on who's traveling that section of roadway. But knowing that that striping of the lane width being reduced is a natural traffic calming measure, I think is one good thing and a step in the right direction here.
So the design up there, what wouldn't inherently or by default cause traffic or cause to be a more of a safety hazard up there? If anything, I'm hearing it could be less or more safe up there.
Yeah, all these design components that we're considering definitely are adding safety to the street section, whether it be to protect those left turn movements, whether it be for use and use of the public right-of-way in its most functional sense to allow parking for residential areas and things of that nature. Some of those things that were brought up at the meeting too that we'll continue to look into are, you know, maybe there's crosswalks warranted at some of these intersections to help draw attention to the heavier pedestrian traffic routes that, you know, you don't want kids stepping out from a parked car, and you want to have either a ped crossing, formal crossing with lights and everything, or even as something as simple as a striped crosswalk on the roadway. Those are some components that we'll continue to look at too and maybe incorporate into the final design.
I'd just like to make a comment that commend Heath for the way he fielded. I think it was about 45 minutes worth of questions the other night, and not all of them were real pleasant ones to be addressing, and I want to commend the manner in which you addressed the concerns and answer the questions, Heath.
Well, thank you. We appreciate that, and as staff, you know, we're all in this together. We want to see what's good for the community. You know, there's no agenda here by any means. It's offering up what we feel is the safest option for a roadway of this stature, of this amount of traffic volume, and what makes sense for Watertown. And that's where these one-on-one meetings with the homeowners will come into play as well and be valued in that respect.
Right, thank you. Councilwoman Manti?
Okay, yes. Once again, I am checking things off as Heath is speaking about the traffic calming, whatever. I guess you've addressed all those things, but I would suggest that if you want an example of places where the sidewalk and driveway depths have been reduced because of the length of the street, and while I'd like 4th Avenue to be wider in a perfect world, if we didn't have the off-street parking, or on-street parking, excuse me, you can see that almost every single driveway, if a car pulled into it, would back out onto the sidewalk. So that needs to be kept in mind too, because I know it's mentioned that some of those driveways will be shortened. And I think it actually helps having the off-street parking for safety, for people coming and going, unless they hang their door out 15 minutes. But anyway, just take a look at that and take that in consideration and picture what it would be like if there was no parking and the driveways were shortened to the point where the cars would touch or hang off of the sidewalk. And I think that might give you an idea about the parking versus non-parking thing. But it is also a traffic calming. When there's a lot of traffic parked or cars parked, the traffic goes much slower on 4th Avenue. So just my comment on that.
Yes, thank you. Councilman Albertson?
I have a question for Heath. Just looking at Highway 14th Avenue, and the sidewalk is right up to 14th Avenue. Is that an option, or is this a complete safety hazard to have a sidewalk like it is on 14th Avenue, where instead of taking the property and probably trees away from the people by having sidewalk right next to the road? I'll just wait for your comment.
Yeah, thank you for that, Councilman Albertson. So when you talk about curbside sidewalk, the biggest, there's two main factors that come to mind on why they're not recommended or we don't like to utilize them, at least in our climate. The main one being for safety reasons, like you indicated, Councilman. You are putting the pedestrians right next to the flow of traffic, which creates inherent and obvious safety concerns. And then the other one is more operational with snow removal. We eliminate the ability to plow our snow off into a boulevard snow storage area once we put that sidewalk next to the back of curb. We do, of course, have some of those sidewalks like that in town. They're not convenient when the street division has to go back through and plow snow off the sidewalks that they put there because it came off the streets. Of course, no homeowner likes to do that either. If we're plowing snow off onto these areas, they don't like to come out and have to remove that from their sidewalks as well. So we try to avoid it for both of those reasons, one for pedestrian safety and then the other one for snow removal.
All right, thank you. Councilman Rademski?
Question on the sidewalk issue again, just a couple of comments. If by standard, if we find sidewalk up there that is good and acceptable and deemed we don't have to replace that, that's all 4-foot sidewalk up there, correct?
Yeah, it varies from 3 to 4 feet.
Okay, and if it all has to be replaced, we're going with 5 feet?
Correct, the new sidewalk width will be 5 feet.
Okay, so if we keep some of that sidewalk up there and we have to pour a new sidewalk, I think we should stay consistent with the 4 feet. Otherwise, it's going to look a little out of character to have sections of 5 foot wide and then down to 3 feet or 4 feet or back to 5 feet.
So in that situation, Councilman Rademski, what we're hoping to do is, what we're planning to do is replace all the sidewalk. And that sidewalk that is 3 or 4 feet that's in good condition would not be assessed back to the homeowner. But we did want one uniform 5-foot width for that entire run, that entire stretch, again for pedestrian safety and pedestrian maximizing the usability of that sidewalk to match our new design standards. So as it sits right now, we've designed a new 5-foot sidewalk the whole stretch, and what we have to do is go back and do the inspection and look at each property to see which portion, if any, each homeowner would be paying for on their own accord.
So just to be clear on that, the sidewalk that would deemed up to today's standards is still going to be replaced anyway, but not assessed back to the homeowner?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions before we move on? Councilman Lallam?
Heath, if you could keep us abreast on those meetings when you have with the homeowners as to what the consensus is, or, conflicts either way, so that we're aware of it.
Absolutely.
So we don't have to, hear about them through other sources.
Sure, absolutely.
I mean, just for our own personal information.
We will do that.
Thank you.
All right. Anyone else? Okay, is there any other old business? Is there any new business? All right, I would like to go into executive session pursuant to SDCL 1-25-2 to discuss and consult with legal counsel on contractual matters and as well as some confidential financial information for economic development purposes. We do not expect to take action upon coming out. I have a motion by Vilhauer and a second by Lallam. And any discussion on that? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed signify by saying nay. All right, motion carries. We'll go into executive session, and I'm sorry, folks, but I have to clear the council chambers for executive Please rise and join me for a prayer by Pastor Jen Tyler of First United Methodist Church.
Let us pray. God of love and light, we give you thanks for this beautiful day, for the gathering of us here together. We ask that in this time together we offer, you would accept all of the agenda that we offer before you. Help us to be faithful in the work that is before us as we seek to serve our community and your people here and beyond. Amen.
Amen. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Albertson,
Here.
Bueller,
Here.
Hoyer,
He was.
Hoyer. Okay. Pauline. Here. Lallam,
Here.
Manti,
Here.
Rademski,
Here.
Roby,
Here.
Vilhauer,
Here.
Y.
Here, present.
Thank you.
All right. Next item on the agenda is approval of the consent agenda. And before we do that, I'm going to move a couple things around. I'm going to move item B off of the consent agenda, and I will put that right before item H on the regular agenda. And then I'm going to move item G from the regular agenda onto consent, since that's an annual action. It's not controversial, and the price has not gone up from last year. And with those changes, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? Councilman Hoyer?
Real quick comment. On B, there's just a typo in it. So it's paragraph 4, I believe. Paragraph 4, just correct the third reference to LGBTQ. Currently reads LGBTQ. So just correcting the language there.
Okay. Sorry about that.
Yep.
Mayor, what was the second change?
Moving item G, the liaison officer, the truancy officer
Oh, okay.
for the school district. We do that every year.
Okay.
Any other comments? All right, I'll look for a motion to approve the consent agenda. Motion by Lallam, second by Holeen. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. All right. The next item is public comments, and this is the time set aside for anyone who would like to make a public comment to step forward and do so. Please state your name into the microphone for the record before making your comment. And if your comment is related to an agenda item, please wait for that agenda item to be taken up by the council. Is there anyone who cares to speak? Seeing no one, we will move on to item 6, which is approval of the agenda as amended. Wait, let's see here. Okay, we just have the one change on the agenda. Is there a motion to approve? Motion by Holeen.
Second.
Second by Lallam. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Okay, item 8 is the regular agenda. A is application for a transfer of ownership of a retail on-off sale malt beverage and South Dakota wine license, farm wine license, and video lottery license from Gencor Inc., doing business as GameSpot Casino. 717 South Broadway, to Red Door LLC, doing business as the Red Door at the same location.
Motion to approve.
Have a motion by Lallam and a second by Rademski. I'll ask the finance officer, Kristen, to explain this.
Thank you, Mayor. Before you tonight is just an ownership transfer, so the location and everything is the same. Simply a transfer of ownership. If there's any specific questions, I can try to answer them. Otherwise, motion to approve.
All right, thank you. I'll go ahead and open the public hearing. Is there anyone here that would like to speak about this item? If so, please come forward to the microphone. See no one, I will close the public hearing and entertain council discussion. Any council questions or comments? Councilman Roby?
I'll be recusing myself from this item.
Noted, thank you. Anyone else? Councilman Vilhauer?
I'm sure I've probably asked this question before, or it's been asked for, when there is an ownership change, do we look at the qualifications or the, of the new owner as far as if there's any issues with that entity or owners?
Kristen, you want to answer that?
We used to actually have a process of going and doing a background check. We no longer do that, but on their application, when they do a transfer of ownership, or if it is a new license, they are asked a couple questions. One is, have you ever committed a felony? So essentially that we're assuming that they're answering that honestly. But no, that's the only thing we do is they kind of answer those questions themselves on the license.
Okay, that refreshes my memory now, so thanks, Kristen.
Yep.
All right, thank you. Any other comments or questions? All right, seeing none, I'll look for action. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Item B is annexation and zoning of the south 88 feet of the west 100 feet of Lot 4 Cook-Cold subdivision. And it's got two parts. Approval of resolution number 20-31, initiating annexation of a tract of land contiguous to the city of Watertown, South Dakota, and I'll do that one first. Is there a motion?
So moved.
A motion by Holeen and a second by Vilhauer. And I'll ask Public Works Director, City Engineer Heath Von Eye to explain this to us, please.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. This is petition to annex into the city for a parcel of land that's adjacent to the current city limits. The owners, Larry Maxwell and Emily Borkus, have petitioned us to annex approximately 0.2 acres. This land is adjacent to the back of their lot that exists along Golf Course Road, and is would subsequently be recommended to be rezoned or zoned R1 upon annexation, which will be the subsequent action if this is approved. This was approved, recommended for approval by the Planning Commission unanimously on July 9th at their meeting on a vote of 7-0. And the urban planner, Brandy Hatton, or myself are here to help answer any questions. I can pull up a map for reference here that I'll share my screen with, so everybody has that information as well. So the portion of annexation and zoning here is immediately south of the lot that exists as a single-family residential unit along Golf Course Road. The zoning in this area is all R1 and is, again, what we would subsequently zone this portion to.
Okay. Are there any questions or comments? Councilman Lallam?
Heath, on that one, we had talked about some other parcels close to it possibly being annexed at the same time. Any feedback on that at all?
You know, I'd have to defer to the urban planner. I don't know as though we gained much traction on that discussion at this point in time. Brandy, could you confirm how that was left?
So that was the discussion that we had thought about. The only thing, and so that it would be like a city petition our city facilitated petition to get the rest of the owners. The only thing is that if they're not ready to develop right now, they might want to leave their property like that. So I think it should just be a case-by-case situation on when they're ready to develop.
No one reached out to us at all?
No. An adjacent landowner did, though, as far as if it was going to be pushed forward, that they would be opposed to it at this time.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other questions or comments on the annexation? See none, I'll look for action. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Part 2 of this is the second reading of ordinance number 20-26, establishing the zoning designation of R1 Single Family Residential District. Is there a motion? Motion by Holeen.
Second.
Second by Law.
Second.
A little bit slow, Bruce, sorry. Or Dan, was that Dan? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and open the public hearing. Is there anyone here that would like to speak about this issue? If so, please step forward to the microphone or state your name if you're online. Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing. Is there any council discussion? Any questions or comments about the zoning? All right, I'll look for action. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Thank you. Item C is the second reading of ordinance number 20-24, a zoning text amendment to chapter 21.02, administration and enforcement of the revised ordinances of the city of Watertown, required public notices.
So moved.
I have a motion by Vilhauer and a second by Hoyer. And I will ask the Public Works Director, Heath Von Eye, to explain this, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. This is an amendment to Chapter 21, the zoning ordinances of the city of Watertown. This particular section of Chapter 21 relates to the public notices that are provided for certain actions that are taken on property within the city limits. The Planning Commission discussed and initiated an ordinance amendment that would update the public notice requirement to for certain actions such as conditional uses, variances, and zoning amendments. They took this discussion up at their June 4th meeting, and this proposed amendment includes language that will provide notice to landowners either adjacent to or within 250 feet, which includes the width of right-of-way. Whichever of those two situations provides greater notice, whether they're adjacent or within 250 feet, from the legal lot of record petitioning for such a change. Notices will be sent by first-class mail is another component. And let me see a couple more highlights here. We also talked about, making sure that we're logging those communications and tracking those first-class mailings to those adjacent or properties within 250 feet, so we have a record of that. And the other components are a sign being placed on property specific to applications for conditional use. That's something that's actually required by South Dakota codified laws, and something that we haven't consistently been performing, and want to just make sure it's clarified in the ordinance. It is a requirement. We will be creating those signs, making those signs, and providing them for the applicants for those conditional uses, along with providing them guidance on where they should be located on their property so they don't conflict with any of our sign placement regulations. With that being said, staff recommends approval. The Planning Commission also recommend approval by a vote of 7-0 from their meeting on July 9th. And it's before council tonight on second reading.
All right, thank you, Heath. I'm going to go ahead and open the public hearing. Is there anyone here that would like to speak about this? If so, please come forward. See no one, I will close the public hearing and look for council discussion. Are there any questions or comments? Councilman Lallam?
Heath, you said we will be placing those signs, or the applicant will?
We will provide them, the applicant will place them.
And if the neighboring properties don't want a sign, recourse? Or are you just putting it on their property?
Oh, it's just on there.
Yes,
Okay.
it'd be a requirement for them to post on the property that's having an application for conditional use.
Okay, so,
Yep.
okay, last time I thought they were placing them on the neighboring properties, which.
Oh,
I
no,
could see
sorry,
some-
sorry for
some
the confusion
very-
there, yeah.
Very upset people, especially
Yeah,
if they
it'd
didn't want
be,
that change.
it'd be a requirement for the applicant to place on the property that's being applied for conditional use.
Okay, well, that makes a lot more clarification.
I'm glad you asked that. If you had that question, somebody else probably did too. Councilman Hoyer?
And then just to verify, Heath, the intent is just so that if somebody's applying for a conditional use, the neighbors have an opportunity to actually be a part of that hearing and discuss it if it's something they perhaps oppose.
Yes, exactly. That's the premise behind the sign posting. A lot of communities use those sign posting requirements in a similar fashion, is what we'll be implementing here.
Great. Sounds like the transparency will be good.
All right, anyone else? See no one, I'll look for action. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Item D is the second reading of ordinance number 20-27, amending the zoning map of the city of Watertown, South Dakota for a portion of Stony Point from R1 Single Family Residential District, C2 Local Commercial District, and A1 Agricultural District to CL Lake Commercial District.
So moved. Or-
Have a motion by Lallam and a
Second.
second by Billhauer. And Heath, will you please tell us about this?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Stony Point Investments has petitioned to rezone the legally described property within the city of Watertown, known as Stony Point, from R1 Single Family Residential, C2 Local Commercial District, and A1 Agricultural District, all to CL Lake Commercial District. The rezone request is mostly consistent with the City of Watertown's 2020 Comprehensive Land Use Plan, which shows this area to be developed with mixed uses, residential and commercial. The Lake Kempesca Master Plan that was approved by the Planning Commission and City Council in 2019 also shows the area being proposed to be rezoned as mixed use. However, and that's where the term mostly consistent with comes into play, the comp plan and Lake Kempesca Master Plan do show open space buffer from the existing residential districts to the west and south from the mixed uses. And the applicant is proposing through the rezone here and the subsequent use of that rezoned area to still inherently have a buffer remain because of the wetlands that exist on the west side of this rezone. And they're accounting for that, those wetlands to remain and effectively act as that green space or that buffer that the comp plan and Lake Kempesca Master Plan outline. The CL Lake Commercial District was strategically and intentionally developed to allow for mixed-use development, infill, that's adjacent to the residentially zoned properties near Lake Kempesca and Lake Pelican. The Lake Kempesca Master Plan also expresses a desire for commercial property around the lake. As we're mostly aware, Lake Kempesca is largely developed as R1 single-family residential. And one of the points behind that plan was to make the communities, fulfill the community's desire for more commercial development, which is difficult to achieve when it's fully developed and zoned the way it is as R1. This CL district has specific design standards to protect residential properties adjacent to it. One of those being that the exterior walls facing R1 district are required to be finished with specific materials, not including metal, over 20% of the wall area. They must also provide visual relief when the walls exceed 50 foot or more in length, and shall also have 15 foot of grass on side yards. The side yard setbacks are much greater for CL than for CL zone properties. They require 30 to 35 feet depending on the building height, more than the 9 feet that's required residentially in other residentially zoned areas. And this, of course, is to help provide for an appropriate buffer between those abutting residential uses and these mixed residential / commercial uses. The Planning Commission recommended approval on July 9th, 2020 at a vote of 6-1. And it's before the council with that recommendation from the Planning Commission on second reading tonight. I believe the one dissenting vote from the Planning Commission was related to an amendment that was proposed on excluding a certain stretch of land on the south side from the rezone that was adjacent to an existing residence. The Planning Commission board did approve on exclusion of a strip of land east of that same residence in an amendment that they took action on, which is also excluded from the rezone action that the council would be taking this evening. I do have a couple diagrams here that I can help pull up for reference and share my screen on, and otherwise answer any questions that the council might have.
All right, thank you. Let him bring his map up. Can you show the adjacent zoning? Or describe it?
Let me see if we have that readily available.
The GIS is up, I think.
It might take a minute to load here.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
That's all right. It'll come quickly. I don't think you mentioned that the H2020 report indicated a great desire by the community to have amenities at the lake, activities, things for people to do, commercial activities in select locations. Of course, we wouldn't want the whole lake to be there, but this location is adjacent. It actually is partially zoned commercial. It's immediately adjacent to some commercial property and is separated from some of the residential area by the water, the wetlands. So there's a natural buffer that kind of makes this mostly isolated. It is adjacent to some R1 property though as well. While you're doing that, I think I'm going to go ahead and open up the public hearing and see if anyone in the audience would like to speak about this. So I will start with, go ahead, anybody can come up and say your name for the record and whether you're for or against the rezone. Thank you, Heath.
All right, my name is Mike Lawrence. I work with Bob Drake. I'm obviously for this this plan. Like you guys said, it's in all of our planning. It's wanted by the community. The CL district was designed to be put in with residential. If you take a look at his map up there, the actual places, I guess I have this map too. Can you bring up my map? Yeah, please. So when you take out the wetlands and the setbacks, this is your buildable area. You go from 27 acres to about 10.86, which 1.22 of those acres are already commercially zoned. Yep. Oh, yep, you bet. Sorry. If you take a look at the adjacent landowners, I mean, there's obviously, if you're developing at the lake, there's going to be adjacent landowners. There's just no way around it. There's no place to develop with it. The thing about this is we have a road on most of the area, so we actually touch adjacent landowners in two spots. One of them is actually, it does touch there, is rather small. It's a lineal footage is considerably less than this. So that's one thing to take into account. We do have the limits of the wetlands. We talked with GFNP. We offered them an easement on them. They refused it. They assured me that, Rhett Russell assured me that those wetlands are safe. And I asked for a letter or something like that, and he said their organization writes letters when things go wrong. Not to clarify. So we tried everything we could do to try to get that taken care of. One thing also I want to take and mention is, this was zoned R1. Bob was in front of this very council, sitting in probably this very chair 7 years ago with a plan to do 27 large lot R1 homes. That failed. Bob wouldn't be here if it went through. A lot of people say, it should just be R1. Well, he tried that in almost the biggest lots you could possibly put up there. If it's 28-acre parcel and he has 27 lots on there, minus the wetlands, it was a pretty good plan, I thought, back then. But he's worked through this whole thing. We've worked with neighbors. We straightened the roads. We paid for engineering. We're working on fixing drainage with our plans. We've waited for the CL district. We're fitting in a box that you guys just built. And that box, 50% of the most expensive land in our community, square foot price, is automatically taken off of that. So you're looking at, let's say this is a $1.4 million, $750,000 of that is just chopped off right to begin with. That's a lot. That's a pretty big investment. We're just asking to stay and stay within the box that you guys just built. Let me see here. We went step by step. If we thought we needed a variance, we worked on changing the ordinance so that we weren't getting a variance and we weren't asking for special favors. We've worked through this process almost tirelessly. Like I said, we have commercial C2 on there. If you look at the residential, we tried that, didn't work. And as far as the ag, it's a non-conforming ag lot at this point. And with that, I guess I would take any questions.
All right, Councilman Lallam.
Mike, on those, a couple of comments we've heard is putting commercial right next to a residential house. I would assume there's going to be a buffer zone through there where you're going to kind of transition from some commercial, some residential, some condos, things of that nature, correct?
There's definitely mixed use, and we don't know even what the plan is. We're going that comes later. Right now, we're looking at the zoning. I can't design this until I know what zone it's in. I can't go with the prelim plan. The city has rules that we have to follow. We have to, do the traffic counts and all that stuff. To go to that next step and start planning buildings, we don't even know how the first building's going to sell out that we already have going up. It looks really well, but those are some issues that you don't know. But if he's going to take the time and give up land to build a marina, we want to make sure that we're able to use the land around it beforehand.
Sure. I'll hold that till your next time through.
Yes.
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
To Councilman Lallam's point, I would point out too that the CL zoning district has several components built into it that help with that transitioning effect. And that's something that the Planning Commission committee and staff looked at and focused on and emphasized when we put the CL district together. We knew that this district, being used as an infill district, is going to be adjacent to R1 zones. So we were intentional about putting some of those design criteria into that zone that inherently creates buffer strips and transitioning to the extent that was reasonable at the time of the adoption of the ordinance anyway.
And I was up here for the Dunn rezone and said you guys don't have the right tool in the box. Well, you made the right tool. And we're using it. And that tool was designed for the lake specifically. It was not designed to be put in with houses. To give the 50% restriction plus your large setbacks. There's a lot of restrictions on this zone, what you can and can't do with it. In fact, we're looking at a lot of our other projects, and it's 50% is a lot of land to give up when you plus your setbacks, so you're looking at a pretty large amount of land that you're going to be giving up on any project that you do. If you look at a storage yard and you have to double the size of the lot just because of the size of the building, it's a lot. That's a large number.
All right, thank you, Mike. Is there anyone in the audience that is opposed to the rezone that would like to step forward and speak?
My name is Lisa Johnson. I live at 848 South Lake Drive. On here on the right side map, we have a full view of what is proposed. My husband Chad and I live here. As homeowners, we are directly impacted by the CL rezone, and we feel strongly that it should not be passed. When we moved here in 2012, we knew we didn't want to live in town. We chose out here for the best of the country and the city. Our house was designed with many windows, bedrooms, living room, dining room on the north side, which will now get the headlight flash from every vehicle leaving this commercial zone. The road is right behind our house, and I can show that later. We would never have built out here, nor designed our home as such to be subjected to this at all hours. These homes that were built or purchased had believed they were in a residential zoning area and not subjected to commercial pressures and the host of concerns that arise from it. In our opinion, if the council permits this change, it's devaluing the homeowner's property and putting the developer's interest before our rights of this residential area. 7 years ago, had we known about this, we would have fully supported the landowner using his property for the intention from which it was zoned residential. What concessions will be made for the homeowners who will have to deal with the increased traffic and noise? Who will compensate us for the loss of the peaceful and quiet environment that we currently have? If this does pass, every day will be like the 4th of July. We live here full-time, not just on the weekends. Our house isn't on the lake. That's how we wanted it. We use all the public access points, and we don't have any issues getting onto the lake. If nothing else, I encourage the council to get in writing from the state game fish and parks that area cannot be used. The wetlands cannot be used or filled in at any point at all. If this does pass, there does need to be a significant buffer between the residential and the commercial, especially where the road is that is right behind our house. I would ask the council to seriously consider if this is something you would like to have in your backyard. Would you like to look at this every day? What would you rather look at, condos, restaurants, a bar, or the natural beauty of the lake? And I do have some pictures if you can show those. So this is taken from our bedroom window, and you can see the neighbors behind us, and here's the road, and this is where the development will be at right here. This is our view of the lake. That's just what it was when we bought it from Dennis. We have lot 3, and there's the wildlife habitat. Again, another view that we have. And then this last one is from our garage, and it does show the house that we could never see that was on the point that was just built here a few years ago. We could never see that. All these trees have been moved out already, and so all of that has been taken out. I do want to thank Mr. Vilhauer and Mr. Albertson for listening to our concerns by emails as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak in favor of the zoning change? If so, please come forward.
My name is Bob Drake, and I guess it doesn't matter where you try to build commercial property or develop property around the lake, because the lake is developed, you are going to cause some negative consequences with some of the residential areas in the area. Now, we've tried to alleviate those concerns, and that's why we have the road going to the south in the first place, was with Conda Williams to the east. We've built the road to go on around and down south. We've drained the water. We straightened the road to alleviate the concerns of another residential person. I can tell you it's a tough thing to try to alleviate everybody's problems. We will use some berms, and we will use some things down there that will help keep it more of a natural setting, but it's, you know, that's kind of the way it is. Yep. Any questions?
I have a question.
Shoot.
I've had comments from people both in favor of and against the rezone. The folks that have been against the rezone haven't been totally opposed to your project, but I've had numerous people say, why the whole thing? If, you know, can't you leave some of it as residential? Why does the whole thing have to be commercial? So how would you respond to that?
Sure. If you look at the property and what's being rezoned here, if you look clear to the south, that was some ag property that couldn't be rezoned or couldn't be used at the current time anyway. If you look at the requirements of the CL zone, you have a lot of 50% of it has to be set aside as basically open spaces, and by doing it all together, we can take that wetland and preserve it and keep it as an open space, you know, to meet that requirement. When we get all done with this, when we're talking about 27 acres, and you end up with 10 or 10.86 or whatever the number was, you can see you're not talking about a lot of space when you get done, but from a commercial standpoint. By the time we take 3 acres out for building the marina, all those things add up. So.
All right, thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak in opposition to the proposed zoning change? Please come forward.
Good evening, Casey DeBoer, 6205 Prairie Hills Avenue. I'm immediately adjacent to the pink up there, which I think is referred to as parcel number 2. And I want to specifically speak about the rezoning of parcel number 2 because it is what it is, surrounds my property on 3 sides, on the north and on the east and a little bit on the west as well. I just don't believe it's appropriate to surround an existing residential property with a new commercial zone. This rezoning has the strong potential to leave a negative impact on the value of my property over time. I was at the last planning commission meeting, and you know, whenever there's a new commercial development occurring adjacent to an existing residential development, there's going to be conflict. This is a case where that's really happening, and the impact on the existing properties now and in the future should be strongly considered as you make your difficult decisions. I oppose the rezoning of parcel 2, which is basically the wetlands, because of the potential negative impact on my peaceful enjoyment of the property and the future value of my property, and because this rezoning is not essential to further development of Stony Point. As this lot is predominantly wetlands, the developer himself has said it will likely never be developed. It is illogical then to me that the parcel would be rezoned to be commercial. I ask the council to consider these impacts to the surrounding properties as you make your decision. Councilman Allen, you made a comment about trying to space the commercial elements from the residential elements. If you look at the documents that are out there for the Plan Commission meeting later this week for the initial review of the TIF, you'll see that the most commercial element of this project, the hotel, is planned for the very south end of the development, probably about 100 yards from my backyard. And so it's those kind of things that are most concerning as we go forward based on how that part of the project is zoned. So again, urge you to leave parcel 2 out of the rezoning. Thank you very much. Any questions for anybody?
Thank you. Yep. Is there anyone else that would like to speak in favor of the rezone?
Hi there, I'm Tara Forsberg Jacobson, and I am speaking as a mixed, I'm neither for it and I'm neither against it. So I am the landowner that kind of has the most at stake. I'm the largest homeowner with the most buffering land, and I am so honored to be able to live up there. I've spoken with many of you about this and told you this, that it is the most incredible land on the lake. And I'm so honored to live there. It's the best sunsets. You know, I have a lot of history up there with my family, and it's just such an amazing property. So I've spoken with many of you, and I know that this is heavy on all of your shoulders, and I appreciate what you're doing, but please tread lightly. We have one chance to do this right. I like what you're talking about, it having this mixed. You know, there's so many people that are speaking for this, and yet they're speaking that many people are against this. And so it's very much on your shoulders to keep this correct as a mixed property. You know, keep the nature there, keep the enjoyment that wants to be there. This is tough, and I commend you for making this vote, and I just want it on record that I neither oppose or promote this. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak about this?
Colin Paulson. I'm neither for or against it. I just wanted to kind of speak up a little bit. One of the most desired things was a marina for this community and the lake, and to use the resource that we have here. Bob is trying to do something great with this land that is one of the only spots that's undeveloped on this whole lake. But I do get the concerns of all these citizens that live near here. We're going to run into that no matter where we are on the lake, because we are 90-some% developed around the lake. So it doesn't really, we're always going to have concerns. And I think the previous speaker spoke to that, where you have to get it right the first time. But I think there's a lot of opportunity here, and I just hope you guys, I know you guys have all taken your time and studied this, and I know this is a tough decision, but thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak? All right, I'm going to close the public hearing now and look for council discussion. Who would like to start? Councilman Hoyer.
I'll just toss out on this. I really appreciate that the developers waited long enough for the Lake Commercial District to be developed. A lot of work went into that. And its purpose, more than anything, is to try and protect those R1 properties so that when we do develop the lake, we're doing it with respect to everything around it. Now, the question came up about why the wetlands are included in that zoning. As part of that, giving up extra land to preserve it, that comes with it, so it has to be included in it for them to meet that requirement. Wetlands are really a prime opportunity for it, just because to eliminate wetlands, you have to replace them with a lot more wetlands, which is really cost prohibitive for any developers. So them having the opportunity to just preserve those and keep that as part of the natural habitat, I mean, that's a positive opportunity for them. I would agree that there's a very, very slim chance that those would ever be changed in development, just because it's, again, very cost prohibitive to touch them, and you go through a lot of red tape as soon as you start playing with wetlands. But again, the Lake Commercial District was developed to make sure that these buildings that go up are visually appealing. They're not cheap. They're done well, and they are aesthetically pleasing to the surrounding area. When it comes to traffic and headlights, one of the things I kind of would question with it is just that this is a natural drive around the lake area anyway, with South Lake Drive being there. I know that there's a lovely restaurant located up in one of those C2s that a lot of us frequent post-golf or just on a good weekend. So I know that there's already traffic going through here. I don't know how significant it's going to be impacted by some extra development. It could be quite a bit, substantially. I mean, there's no way to guess that. Hopefully, of course, they would see business. On top of that, too, though, when it talks about property value, yes, being next to a hotel could affect you, but at the same time, as amenities go in next to you as well, that's going to increase your value. So it's a flip of a coin in some ways, but we have to, at some point, as a community, respect our goals and take some of those chances. Sometimes your views are going to change a little bit. But you just do the best with what you got, and there's some people willing to take a very large risk attempting this, and they are going through every hurdle that we put out there for them. So for me, I'm going to be going yes on this, just because we have to take those chances sometimes and go after some of this stuff because they don't come around every day. So with that, they'll continue to go through all the hoops that we put out there and respect the district that we created specifically for this. So that's where I sit on it.
All right, thank you. Councilman Albertson?
I actually have a couple of questions maybe for Bob. And is he still there?
Yes, he is. Bob, do you want to come to the microphone, please?
Bob, you've heard the comments from the two people that have expressed some concern about that. Number one, there's nothing you can do about the Johnsons losing the aesthetic beauty of looking over the lake and what they thought they had. But the headlight issue, is there anything that you could do to help? That certainly would be something that would be really sickening, if that's the right word, to look at headlights starting at, at dark and going on until morning. Is there anything you could do about that? And number two, the house that's going to be 200 yards, you talked about a berm. Is there anything you could do to kind of break that down so the landowner, the house owner doesn't have just that view right into your area there? And so I'll just sit back and wait for your answer. Thank you.
10 acres or whatever. Oh, okay. Sorry. I thought you had it.
The other thing is, she's not guaranteed headlights from the development across the road either.
Okay. You get this one. I don't know which way is better. Is this way better for you? Anyway, technically this would be north towards the lake, and so if you're looking at this parcel, the actual buildable area comes down in here. We're looking at adding a berm and possibly rocks, trees, whatever we can do to protect the house that's here. When this road originally had gone around, had curved and came back, and that's when Casey was saying that the headlights were coming into his house. Casey's a little lower than the houses that are over here. There's a huge ridge over on this side, and so from a light standpoint, you're coming down this road, and can lights get up there? I would suppose. I don't know how you would stop that. I'm willing to plant some trees over there if that would help, but that's on her property. As far as her view, setting where she's setting, Miss Johnson sets up here. So let me see if I can get the right spot right there. Sorry. Like I said, she's up on a hill, so she has a big view. When you come in on those lights, you're actually coming in at a lower level. Now, lights obviously don't go straight; they go up some, and so I don't know I don't know what else you could do on that end other than maybe plant some trees, on that end, and we would do that for her if she wanted that. As far as straightening the road, that took care of the questions over there. What was your other question, Dan? Dan? What we're trying to do is make it as aesthetically pleasing as we can. We're trying to keep with the same mode that Dennis has down below. When we finish the pond and reworking the pond, we'll have rocks and trees, and we're going to try to make it as, like I say, as aesthetically pleasing as we can. But on the light side of things, we're willing to plant the trees if she wants some trees or that end. But it's hard to block something when you're clear up on a hill. So,
Councilman Albertson, did you have another question? Or did he answer them? I see he's trying to talk. We can't hear you, Dan. His microphone's going on and off, but I don't hear anything. So,
I would mention that when we were talking about the hotel would be clear up here, into this parcel along the bank, which would be probably quite a bit farther than what Casey had said.
Okay, thank you. Are there other comments, Councilman Vilhauer?
I've got a question. I asked the same question 2 weeks ago, but I just want to ask it again. When this came before us a few years ago, at that time, this project had been studied to death. Everybody and their dog had a study that was presented to us as far as the ramifications or implications to the lake, the area, et cetera. I'm not hearing much of that this time. So I guess I'll ask, where's, Lake Kempesca Water Project District, the Isaac Walton League, DENR, Game Fish and Parks was referenced, the Ikes, the Army Corps of Engineers. Where are those groups at? They've been in the process through all this, and just haven't heard much from any reference made to those groups this time around compared to a few years ago.
Well, the developer did make a presentation to the Lake Kempesca Water Project District, and I was there, and they expressed appreciation that the developer was going through the hoops, as Councilman Hoyer mentioned, and that's different from last time. The Game Fish and Parks, the Corps of Engineers, the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, those agencies have all been contacted and asked to make a ruling before the council acts. And last time they were going to have them rule after the council took action. So the council was kind of put out, first. And so I know that made the council nervous. But at this time, they have been following every requirement that we have, including the highly controversial request to not have to comply with the stormwater regs last time. So this time they're complying. Councilman Vilhauer?
I guess as long as I have the floor, yeah, just a comment. If I were the Johnsons, if I were Mr. DeBoer, I would have the very same concerns that they would have if this were being put in my backyard. And I expressed that in an email to the Johnsons, that I hate being put in this position, but I guess I feel our job as a member of the council is to look out what we feel is best for the best interest of the community. And this is something that I feel will benefit the community. Unfortunately, there are going to be some parties that may be harmed by this. But also a comment that I pay a lot of attention to the process that's been involved. The CL Lake District, that took us, that was several years in process before we finally got that pulled together, and this is an example of where it would fit. So I respect that process that was undertaken for that zoning designation. Also, I sat through or watched the Planning Commission, or sat through the Planning Commission discussion on this, and I respect those people, the due diligence they put into their decision. I feel I've got to take that into consideration how I vote when it comes before us as a council. So having said that, I feel I've got no basis not to support this, even though there are going to be some individual landowners that may be harmed by this.
Thank you. And before we get too further into the council discussion, the public hearing is still open. Is there anyone else that would like to speak before I close it? That's all right. I don't see anybody coming forward, so I will, whether I closed it or not, I'll close it again. I'm closing the public hearing, and now we can have some more discussion. Would anyone else like to weigh in? Councilman Lallam?
I've heard some of these concerns. I've talked to several of you folks out there. To Glenn's point, we put a lot of emphasis on our planning and zoning boards and to do the right thing and to come up with these. City staff as well as many people were involved in coming up with the commercial lake district. It's a long endeavor. I feel for everyone out there that has their property impacted either way. To Tara's point, you know, she butts up right next to it and right next to the lake. You know, I think when you're dealing with this, and especially the scale that it'll be done, you know, it has to be done correctly. I don't believe in my heart that the developers are going to do anything that's going to, you know, harm their property intentionally or anyone else's for that matter, because they, frankly, if you do it wrong, you don't sell them. So, I mean, the public will react to how well it is done and if it's done correctly, one way or another. So, you know, I feel for everyone involved in this, but it's a long process that's been drug out, and I think all the hoops have been hit, and I think that the you know, developers are doing things the correct way. I envision that they'll be doing that the correct way going forward as well, and there's recourse if it is not done correctly. So, for that case, I will be voting in favor as well.
Thank you. Anyone else? And I have to say, when we just did our Lake Kempesca master plan, we asked the consultant to advise us where else can we put commercial development, because there's a big demand for it. And they found a grand total of 0 other places other than where it exists right now that they would recommend for commercial development. This is immediately adjacent to commercial development, so there's not a lot of places like that. All right, I don't see anyone else wanting to weigh in, so I'm going to call for action. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Thank you, everyone. Okay, item E is the first reading of ordinance number 20-29, establishing the zoning designation of PUD planned unit development for a portion of the Dakota Commons addition. This is just a first reading, so no action. Heath, would you please tell us about it?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. This area of town is Dakota Commons LLC is the owner of this area, and they have petitioned to annex and zone approximately 21.5 acres. This is part of the Dakota Commons subdivision out on the east side of town. It's south of 3rd Avenue East and east of 19th Street North. It's proposed to be zoned PUD, planned unit development, as is the previous phases of this subdivision. The portion of Dakota Commons that is currently annexed and zoned is also PUD, and this is the next logical phase of development for this subdivision. The planned unit developments are used when a unique zoning concept is proposed. The developer has submitted a PUD plan as a requirement for this annexation and zoning. This action later on upon second reading, what it will do is establish this PUD zoning district. But if you recall, we did recently amend our PUD zoning regulations, and so a subsequent detailed preliminary plan would come forth to staff and Planning Commission, and that would then solidify the lot layouts, the street alignments, and things of that nature at a subsequent, through subsequent reviews. First reading tonight, so no action, and Brandy or I could help field any questions council might have.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions? Councilman Lallam?
Heath, could you put up the map on that just to show the public where that's going to be located at, please?
Absolutely. So here's out on the east side of town. This line right here represents 19th Street, running north and south. This pink area is what's currently annexed and zoned as a PUD in the Dakota Commons subdivision. This hatched area is what we're talking about for action, the first reading tonight and second reading at the subsequent council meeting. This is 3rd Avenue Northeast, running east and west on the north side of the property limits.
All right. Oh, Councilman Bueller, you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Heath, I'm going to ask you the question, how is this going to differ as far as the layout goes, lot sizes, if there's cul-de-sacs, number of lots, street widths, any of those kind of issues. Is this going to be different than what we've done so far with Dakota Commons?
I would say that based on the concepts that the developer has submitted, they're looking to continue along the same lines of what they've got out there now. That has not been vetted through the formal review and approval process yet at this point. I know that there have been some discussions about sidewalks and whether they should be out in the front yards. As most are aware, that requirement was waived in the PUD, the past PUD phases of the subdivision, where they have sidewalks meandering in the backyards, which is a unique design component that this particular developer likes to utilize and is utilized in other communities. So, those are some design factors we'll be wading through and determining when we get the preliminary plan for review. And Brandy is here too. She could expand on that a little bit more.
Yep, thank you, Heath. And he touched on what I was wanting to make clear to you guys, is that they are wanting to propose the same development that they've been doing for the past 20 years. The main thing, though, is that they propose lesser street widths and no sidewalks adjacent to the streets. They do the recreational trail in the rear yards, which does make Dakota Commons desirable for some people in the neighborhood feel that it does have. I know that it's been brought up before, though, that some people can find that problematic of not to have the sidewalks in front. But that is what was approved previously for this PUD, and so it would be changing what's already been developed in the past, but this is the time for that.
Brandy, if I may interject another question. The preliminary plan that we review as staff will subsequently go to the Planning Commission. Is that correct, for formal approval?
Yes.
Under our new PUD ordinance?
Yep.
But does not come forward to council for approval,
Right.
correct?
Right.
So I just want to make that point clear as well.
Yep.
Right, and that is a change from, it used to be the PUD plan was approved before the zoning was granted. And that's been changed. So now it's just the zoning. They'll work out with between the staff and the Plan Commission, the layout of the streets and the drainage and all of that. There are things that have changed since the other preliminary plan was approved that need to be revisited this time around. But all of this is just talking about the PUD zoning. Any other questions? Councilman Rademski.
With these sidewalks not being in the front of the properties, I was up there earlier this summer and there were probably 6 or 7 rummage sales going on, and there was a ton of people up there, a ton of cars parked there, and there were people coming out from behind cars, and the only place they had to walk was down the street. Is this putting the city at any risk for potential lawsuit by somebody that may get hit walking in the street because there is no sidewalk there to walk on?
City Attorney, are you available for comment?
I guess I would have to do the research specifically on that, but I mean, in general, in everything we do, that there's always risk of a lawsuit. We're not immune, but I would have to do the research on the specific question.
Thank you.
Councilman Roby.
I would just like to piggyback off of Jason's comments, and that this is the drum I've beaten many times in the past, but we are unbelievably inconsistent in how we handle sidewalks. Unbelievably inconsistent. I'll make the comment again. If you drive up my neighborhood, we have ADA access and no sidewalks. And it just looks funny, if nothing else. But we put them in there because the federal money's dictating we have to do that. So I would just say, as you guys are working this project, I hope we can work towards some consistent standards in what we do with sidewalks. I don't know where if I'm going to push a stroller down the street, that's the only option I think I have here, unless I go out to a path on the edge of the property. But what do you do if you go down between houses? I just think that's an issue.
Thank you. Back in the early 2000s, when the preliminary plan was approved, the thought was that sidewalks were used for recreation, so we'll put them in the back and there'll be grassy areas and people can use it for recreation. They weren't thought of as part of our transportation network to get from point A to point B for practical purposes. And if the council disagrees with that thinking, this would be the time to say it because you may not get to weigh in. Councilman Roby.
It's a quick follow-up. This is a PUD, right? So it has its own set of rules, so to speak. So that it does allow for some, if I could say, non-conformity. It does. But I just want to make a general comment. We need to get some consistency on this. And it comes back to a fairness issue. We've talked about who gets assessed, who doesn't get assessed. I just think we gotta work towards some consistency.
Madam Mayor, if I could, to Councilman Roby's point, you're exactly right. The PUD is an opportunity for the developer to be inconsistent. If we were to look at it that way, that's kind of what the PUD is designed to do in more ways than one, not just the sidewalk discussion, but street widths, lot sizes, lot configurations, things of that nature. So, you know, that's definitely something that if the council were concerned about and wanting to require sidewalks to be street side through the rest of the subdivision, yeah, that is something we'd want to know, whether it's tonight or you provide us feedback outside of this meeting or however appropriate. Because the way the ordinance is written now, it will go back to the planning commission, but not back to the council. Also on the same tune, I think that we've got the sidewalk regulations that we need and have started down a path of consistently applying them. We've been talking about construction projects and things of that nature, but for new construction, it's pretty systematic that we require a 5-foot sidewalk detached with a boulevard, and we're making sure that the new subdivisions are built out in that manner. So rest assured, I think we're in the right direction in some measures as far as sidewalk management for the city.
All right, thank you. Councilman Hoyer?
I'll start out saying I 100% echo Dawn on all those sentiments as well. But I have lived in communities that utilize actually both, where you do have the sidewalk out front, but you also achieve the same effect of having the trails in the back. It works really well when you do both. Seeing that they don't have it out front, yes, that is actually very concerning as a public safety issue. But I guess you look at it in this situation, one, they're covered by what they are with the PUD. Two, you see there's no sidewalk in this neighborhood when you buy a home here. So I guess you know that's going on. But then on top of it, I'm just curious, who's responsible for clearing off all those sidewalks that are located in the back of these properties, or do they magically disappear in the winter?
They have an association that does all the snow removal and lawn maintenance.
So they can still be utilized. That's good.
I don't know that they do that in the winter. Does anybody know?
I'd hope they would, just because, again, that's a means of walking. I don't think kids are probably walking to school from this neighborhood. That's not an excuse for it. But for me, I would personally, I would say, yes, you should require, at least for the rest of them, to go ahead and add those sidewalks, because there's huge stretches that are going to be going in here. And if we continue to expand, which who knows, maybe we'll do that to the east and to the south, then it's better to get it back in line than keep going down a path, unless we're just going to be like, this is the weird neighborhood where you don't get to walk on a sidewalk. So have fun with your kiddos in the street. So I just hope we don't go that route, because you don't know what the future is going to hold. Maybe we'll add another elementary school out there to the east, who knows. So I'd rather be looking ahead than just being like, this is a hard decision, so let's not talk about it.
All right, thank you. Councilman
Mayor,
Bueller?
if I might.
Go
Yes,
ahead.
thank you. I can give a little quick history on this development. This was designed as a kind of a meandering greenway type neighborhood. And there was a lot of deliberation on this. And the sidewalk issue was a big part of it, in the fact that we had recreation trail to work with because of the layout of this neighborhood. They did come to us originally with much narrower streets, drive over curbs. They wanted more lots in the cul-de-sac, smaller diameter cul-de-sac roads. So there was like I say, there was a lot of discussion, a lot of study on this. And we did look at Brookings, because the developer, I believe, is from Brookings, and they have one of those by the golf course down in Brookings, so that we had an opportunity to see how that worked out. I believe we talked to residents, but I do have a concern. You know, I'm sure they're going to try to get back probably to that type of a layout that they originally proposed. We held to our guns, and it was some months later before these folks came back and said, we're going to develop this. But I would be concerned about sidewalks with development to the east. I don't know that we can allow, you know, just say that the greenway and the recreational trail that we've got right now would be applicable to those lots to the east. I mean, that's not going to suffice for that. So I do think the way it looks to me, this is laid out, that probably is going to be a candidate for sidewalks.
Thank you, Councilman. Anyone else? All right, no action here, so we'll move on. The next item is F, approval of resolution number 20-34, the vacation of a portion of public right-of-way for alley abutting the east side of the County Fair Banquet Hall. Have a motion by Lallam and a second by Helene. And there's no, just a clarification, no public hearing at all required for a vacation? It was noticed that there was a public hearing? Okay, it just didn't show up on the agenda. So, I think we should have one. If there's anyone that would like to speak, I would certainly allow it. And, but before we go there, I will ask, City Attorney, do you want to tell us a comment about that?
I was just going to say, you know, if it was noticed, we could still have the public hearing just because of the work done on the
Right.
agenda. You can
Yeah.
public hearing.
Yeah, I'll do that. I will open a public hearing, but first we'll let the Public Works Director, Heath Von Eye, introduce the topic.
Thank you, Mayor. The petitioners are Chris Gamber of GT Brothers LLC, Mayor Sarah Karen on behalf of the City Council, and Jan DeBerg of the Watertown Community Foundation. Those are the adjacent landowners that are necessary to sign a petition for the vacation of a portion of public right-of-way, as is customary in any case for any right-of-way vacation. The city does own land on the east side of this particular alley. I will pull up the map here for reference. And the primary cause for the request for the vacate, let me zoom in on this. So here we are in the downtown area. For context of where we're at, this is 2nd Street Northeast. City Hall is located right here. You got County Fair Grocery Store right here. Here is the Banquet Hall, also part of the County Fair property owners. This Banquet Hall is being proposed to be redeveloped into new infill development within the downtown area. In order to accommodate that development is what has sparked the interest in this vacate of this portion of the alley. This would be the northerly half of this north-south alley that's being requested to be vacated. There are utilities present in the alley. They would need to be properly protected with a utility easement. The vacate resolution indicates that either a utility easement of this same size and location will be granted, or if the utilities are caused to be relocated or realigned, utility easement under any new alignment area is required of the developer as well. That's pretty well a nutshell summary of this right-of-way vacate for this alley, and we'd stand by for any questions.
All right, that being done, I will go ahead and open the public hearing and ask if anyone would like to speak about this issue, to come forward.
revisiting this once again. The reason why we're
Jesse, could you
oh.
state your name for the record, please?
Sorry, Jesse Craig Development.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. Looking at vacating the alley and then also requesting that I have the city's 10 feet conveyed to me to complete the project for the concession area for the Gamber family on the park side, on the east side of the project. And the main reason for that is just the requirement they have for a big walk-in cooler. They've got a humongous smoker that they just purchased to expand their smoked meat section.
Okay.
Chris Shilkin, Watertown Development Company. So as we're looking at this site, I know in past discussion talked about the city potentially giving their half, and I know Jesse's been working with the telecommunication folks and Bert from Watertown Municipal Utilities, and it sounds like most of those are figured out. I know visiting with some, there's been concern over the park. However, I think was John via Zoom, or was he up here in person? Okay. So, of course, the park design is not started yet. So one of the things that I know in our conversation was John was excited to work in conjunction with Jesse's proposed two projects, this one and then the other one where the Palace site is at. So I do think if that's a concern, there is some time to get that figured out. And if you're talking about 10 to 20 feet of easement, you're going to have to stay 10 feet away from those utility boxes anyway, as when those need any fixing, they have to have 10 feet of clearance. So from a downtown perspective, creating walkability, helping out the Gambers if they want to do, which in turn helps out Parkside Place, we would support this from a downtown initiative.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak about this issue in the public hearing?
Madam Mayor, if I could expand on a couple of comments.
Sure.
So the vacate tonight, what the council would be acting on is a conventional vacation of this right-of-way. So the westerly half, the westerly 10 feet would go back to the westerly property owner. The easterly 10 feet would be retained by the city because we're the easterly adjacent property owner. Now the subsequent deeding of our 10 feet to the developer is something that would come in a subsequent action outside of tonight's action. And it's my understanding that the developer, regardless of whether this 10 feet of the city's gets deeded back to them, is still under the, still wanting to proceed with the vacate request regardless of that determination. So I just wanted to point out that tonight's action wouldn't involve any of the deeding, but it would be a conventional vacate where half goes to each adjacent property owner.
I appreciate knowing that up front before they take action. So in an effort to be transparent, that's your intention, but that's not the action that will be taken tonight. Okay, is one last call. Anyone else want to speak in the public hearing before I close it? See no one, I will close the public hearing and entertain council discussion. Councilman Bueller?
Sorry about that. I forgot to put my hand up.
Oh, okay. Anyone else? Councilman Vilhauer?
Just a comment, it's in the agenda packet, but this was approved unanimously by the Planning Commission recently.
Anyone else? Councilman Lallam.
What we're looking at proposing is vacating this alley here if that park goes into the east of it. Whether we own that half of it or not is probably irrelevant at that point. I mean, we're not gonna be able to move snow through that alley if we vacate a portion of it anyway. And it sounds like the adjoining property owners are in favor, and obviously we're the third party in that. So, I mean, it makes sense.
All right. Chris?
Just a comment. I know visiting with Jesse as well and other prospects here on the park and things, and to not hold up the project, how soon, shortly, would we know if the city's willing to deed their half? I know it's not an agenda item tonight, so I don't want to muddy the waters there, but I know with excavation starting kind of delayed for this to figure out what's happening, would that be something that could happen fairly quick that you guys are willing to make a decision on? Or what do you guys think about that for a discussion purpose anyway?
And the reason for that is we're literally going to be excavating from the east to the west. And so to leave 10 feet, excavate everything, and then come back around with the size of the machinery that we're using to try to excavate another 10 feet from, from west to east, it makes it very cumbersome, especially when we're going to be going over brand new utilities that may possibly be buried.
It's certainly an item that would be eligible to be discussed in executive session. And we have several executive session items to tackle.
I didn't want to muddy, but just for planning purposes tonight, would we be willing to stay for that tonight, or is that okay?
Yeah,
Okay.
we can't take action.
No, understand.
So, just so you know. Okay, anyone else? Council? All right, I'll look for action. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is 5B, which is the ratification of LGBTQ plus liaison appointments. And I'll just start by saying I put that on the consent agenda as I put all liaison appointments. They go on the consent agenda normally, but I'm happy to discuss this outside. These are my appointments, and I'm asking for the council to ratify them. Ensuring that all citizens are protected from discrimination is important to the City of Watertown. A demonstrated commitment to equality through laws and policies that protect everyone, including LGBTQ people, sends a clear message that all residents, visitors, workers, and businesses are welcome and valued. Inclusive, non-discrimination policies will give Watertown a competitive edge. Census data shows that LGBTQ people live in virtually every city in the country. The City of Watertown seeks to provide inclusive city services and programs to its citizens. Liaisons are being appointed to help accomplish that goal. The individuals to be appointed have volunteered to serve as liaison between the LGBTQ plus community and the mayor's office or the police department. And the liaison to the mayor's office is responsible for looking at city policies and services through an LGBTQ lens and speaking up when a policy or service might exclude LGBTQ people. This position is also known to be a friendly ear to constituents who might want to bring LGBTQ-related issues to the city government, but are fearful they might be dismissed or misunderstood. The liaison to the police department serves as a bridge between the community and law enforcement. The liaison is an advocate for fair and respectful enforcement of the law, as well as an officer that the community can rely upon to appropriately respond to sensitive issues. So I have recommended the appointment of Brett Reese, and he's here tonight as a liaison to the mayor's office, and Jessica Johnson, liaison to the police department, and Jess is a police officer on the force. So the action I'm looking for is a motion to ratify the appointments.
So moved.
Have a motion by Hoyer.
Second.
Second, was that Manti?
Yes, it was.
Thank you. Have a motion by Hoyer and a second by Manti. And go ahead and look for discussion. Yes. Discussion. Is there any discussion? Councilman Roby? Well, not really. Okay.
It was put on kind of at the last minute. So I actually think that we should, we're kind of hurrying some things through lately. I don't think we should pass this tonight because we're trying to hurry some things through. And when it gets put on the agenda like that at the last minute, we don't have a chance to digest that. We are part-time council members. We don't work full-time. I know that I was doing some traveling as of late. It shows up on the consent agenda. Now it's on the agenda, which is fine. My question is, regardless of the issue, when it gets dropped on the agenda like that last minute, we don't have time to digest it or do any due diligence.
I have never put any of my liaison appointments on the full agenda. No, actually, I had appointed Jess as the both police and mayor's office a couple years ago. So maybe it was last year. Other council input? Councilman Holeen?
Thank you, Mayor. And I appreciate you pulling that from consent. I know that the mayor has power to appoint someone as liaison, but to create a position, appoint, and put on a consent seemed a little bit too much all in one fell swoop. I think that it needed discussion among the full council. And I think that that discussion started at the last council meeting on a much larger issue during the Human Rights Commission. That conversation is still ongoing. And since that is a much larger issue and the goals of the Human Rights Commission or Human Relations Commission, or as you're restating it, the goals of that and the construction of that are almost identical to the creation of this liaison position, which is to provide a sounding board, to make things easier, things like that. So at the very best, if we move forward with the larger issue, this would make this redundant or duplicate, or it would duplicate efforts. And it seems to me that we should resolve the larger issue of the Human Rights Commission, which we will be doing in future meetings. I think we should resolve that before we move on to issues like that. So I make a motion to table this.
I'd second that motion.
We have a motion to table by Holeen and a second by Lallam. Okay, who would like to weigh in on this? I'll just start by saying.
There's no discussion.
Oh, okay. Is that what you're gonna say, Matt?
Yeah, I was just gonna let you know, there's no debate on the motion to table.
Okay, so I'll ask for a vote on tabling. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed signify by saying nay.
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 Okay.
Roll call vote, please.
Okay. Albertson,
Aye.
Mueller,
Aye.
Hoyer,
Nay.
Helene, Lallam,
Aye.
Manti,
Nay.
Rademski,
Aye.
Roby,
Aye.
Vilhauer,
Aye.
Y.
Nay.
Motion is tabled.
Okay, and the date, next meeting?
Mayor, I believe the intention behind the motion to table, unless the motion maker corrects this, but if it's a motion to table, effectively it's on the table indefinitely until there's a motion to pick it up off the table.
And with your permission, I would speak to that.
Please do.
I, being a little bit of a rules nerd, I went back and checked my Roberts rules, and I would say that was the intention. There is some, originally when Roberts rules was written, there was some open interpretation, but for the last 100 years or so, the motion to table puts it on the table until a motion to take it off the table brings it back. And so someone would have to make the motion to take it off the table, have it seconded, and have a majority vote to take it off the table for this to come back.
Okay, so I have a question for the city attorney. Since Jess was appointed as the liaison to the police department and the mayor's office in the past, does she just continue? Or I would assume so. In both those
Well,
roles?
You know, I don't think that this is a formally created position in any way, and so I don't know that well, I guess I'm not really sure what the title liaison really bestows on her or doesn't. So if she's been doing whatever she's been doing, unless there's something I'm not aware of where a position was formally created, I don't think that what she's doing ceases in any way.
Okay, she's a friendly ear, and I'm sure she would continue to act as a friendly ear, even if it wasn't ratified. And I hope the public understands that. She's willing, and I think Brett is too, whether or not he has a formal appointment. Brett, do you want to, please, come to the microphone.
Matt, the motion to table has been made and approved. Discussion on this item is over. Is it not?
Well, technically the mayor is the chairperson of the meeting. And so this item has effectively been tabled. That is concluded, but as far as whether or not the mayor would like to give somebody the podium, that's certainly her call.
I think Brett's been waiting patiently, and I would like to give him a chance to speak.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm sorry if some of you felt blindsided by this. This was not supposed to be some trick under the books or anything. To Councilmember Holine's point, these liaison appointments are distinctly different from the Human Rights Commission that we are talking about. And I would ask you guys to defer to someone who is LGBTQ to trust in what I feel in the community as to why these appointments are important. If I had someone come and assault me based on my LGBTQ identity, I would want to know that there is a police officer in the police department that not only affirms my sexual orientation, but would help me do that. And what this appointment would do is put her information on the public website for LGBTQ members to come and speak to them. It's the same thing with the appointment to the mayor's office. We didn't, in our HRC bill that's about to come by the Human Relations Commission, that's only employment, that's only housing, public accommodations. You all know there are multiple facets of government other than that relate to LGBTQ issues. And so that would be is for someone from the LGBTQ community, again, to know that someone in city government supports them and would validate them and would understand what they're talking about, to allow them to come to someone so that I can relay that message best to either the city council or the mayor or whoever would best address that issue. These are harmless appointments, and all these do is show someone that is LGBTQ in this community that the city is going to listen to them, and not just regarding the things that we're about to talk about, but in other facets of the city as well. And that's why I would urge someone to bring this back from the table and actually pass these liaison appointments, because they do have importance in our community and are significant and are not just redundant of what we're going to talk about next.
Thank you. Councilman Holine.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to register my protest on that. A motion to table ends debate, specifically said in Robert's rules. So to allow someone to talk on a motion and debate it after the motion was tabled is improper according to the rules. And furthermore, I will say that that just proved my point, that we have a larger discussion to go forward with on the Human Relations Commission, a much larger discussion that will encompass this one. So that's why I tabled this motion, because we have a much larger discussion ahead of us that needs to be resolved first. So I would like to register those two things.
Okay, thank you. And I'll just say for the record that the what we're about to discuss, the ordinance, the human rights, is not encompassing the liaison. That's a completely separate thing. Councilman Hoyer?
I just have a quick question for Matt, if he doesn't mind. In the future, if we do table something and there is somebody in the room who would have something to say about it, can they bring it up like an old business or announcements, or just wait till the next meeting for public comment? Is that an appropriate venue to discuss that?
Right. Again, the mayor regularly allows people to speak on agenda items. There's a public comment period. There's old business, new business. That at the end of the day, the mayor is the chairperson of the meeting, can allow people to speak at her discretion. And so it could have potentially waited for old business, I suppose.
Okay, I was just curious with it, since we tabled it, if it plays a little differently. I know some things we've ended it as like a talk on a subject before, and then we've allowed someone to speak at the end, kind of like as a closing comment kind of thing, or a reaction to it. So I just was looking for a little clarification from city attorney, so thank you.
All right, thank you. Anyone else want to speak before we go on to our next item? Okay, the next item is a discussion of ordinance number 20-28, amending the Fair Housing Ordinance. And I just want to say here, this is a good time to say it. I put it on in this way because that's how it was presented. And what we're actually looking at doing, though, is not actually amending the Fair Housing Ordinance, but the city attorney has taken my pitiful draft and worked it into something that's much better. And it's actually repealing the Fair Housing Ordinance or replacing it with a more expansive human relations ordinance. So we'd actually just repeal 7.12 and create 7.13, which is a broader description. But I want to say this is all about non-discrimination, and we're not trying to overstep any laws that exist. The main purpose in doing this ordinance is to make it easier for people who are being discriminated against for any number of things. And I know most of them are not controversial. It's the LGBTQ part of it that makes it controversial. But it's not just for LGBTQ. It's for any marginalized section of our community which feels that they have had their rights infringed upon. And the federal laws exist, and someone can always sue someone else if they feel aggrieved by some behavior that has happened to them, if they feel like in an employment situation they were passed over because they're Native American. They can sue if they want. They're going to have to hire a lawyer, and they can go to court. This doesn't make those powers any stronger. What it does is it creates this body of citizens who will act as a sounding board to hear the complaint from the person and tell them whether or not they think it's a valid complaint. And there's very little that they can do if there is a problem other than perhaps mitigate it through this process that we're establishing here, which is a talking back and forth between the aggrieved person and the person that they're aggrieved of, the behavior, so that they can possibly work it out and not have to go to court. And that's the whole intention here. And I didn't want to rile people up. I just want to let our community create this group so that they can hear fellow citizens' complaints and help them work it through. So with that, there's no action tonight. I'm very pleased with the work that the city attorney has done. Thank you, Matt, for putting this in much better order than I originally presented it. And I hope it's less, I don't know what the word is. People didn't like it, so I hope this is more palatable. But I would like to invite Brett Reese to speak right away before anyone else, if he wants to add to this. He has been helping me with this, and I appreciate his help. He has a perspective and life experiences that help him to see clearly what needs to be done.
Yeah, thank you again, Mayor. First of all, I'll be reaching out to each of you after this meeting and offering to set up a meeting, whether that be 15 minutes long, however long it takes, to really, I understand this is a lengthy policy, and so to go over this and talk about those issues with you, I'll be extending that offer. But I think this ordinance is best encompassed by section 7.1302, specifically number 5, where it says, to effectuate this policy by means of public information and education, mediation and conciliation, and enforcement. That's really what this ordinance amendment does. First of all, the committee that would be created is in charge of providing more information and education about different members of our community, promoting that community acceptance that we all talked about we want to promote back in June when I asked about the flag policy. This would allow a group to be in charge of that, which is led by the city, so that, you know, we have a more welcoming community. And then in cases where we don't have that welcoming community, where, you know, people are discriminated against based in employment or public accommodations, the first step of this ordinance, which I think works well in a small community like ours, we like to handle things locally, and that's what this commission would allow. It's that mediation and that conciliation process. They would file a complaint, and the Human Rights Commission would then determine whether or not they think there is probable cause for this complaint. So any complaints that are unfounded, those probable cause hearings are confidential. Nobody would be hearing about that, and all proceedings are confidential. If the commission determines that there is probable cause for this, then they would make a recommendation. They would go first to that mediation and conciliation process that we talked about. A representative of the city, I'm guessing it would be our city attorney, would meet with the parties and try to find an agreement with them so that no court action is necessary. We don't have to get caught up in legal fees. In fact, the people that would be protected under this ordinance often struggle having access to effective counsel. And so this would provide a more community-based approach to solving discrimination. It's what Brookings has done since they passed this in 2017. They've resolved 3 disputes. None of them had to go to court, and parties were either there was a mediation found, or they just found the complaint didn't have any enough substance to it. And then, if that still doesn't work, then it's kind of where the teeth of this resolution come into play, and that's enforcement, which, if there's no enforcement mechanism to this commission, it's not as helpful to the LGBTQ community and other communities either, because we already have a Human Rights Commission technically under the mayor, but if they can't do anything about it, that's not as helpful. But the enforcement then, and again, there are a lot of protections involved in this to make sure that these are substantiated claims and that they're not unsubstantiated. So again, we talked about that probable cause hearing. Then it goes to a public hearing in which members of this commission would hear evidence and witness testimony to determine whether or not there was actually discrimination. And then if they find that there wasn't, it's dismissed, the complaint is dismissed, and if they find that there is, then they provide a recommendation to either the city attorney to prosecute under city ordinance, or they ask for a cease and desist order through a judge. And at any point, the parties involved can transfer this to an actual court of jurisdiction. So there, I understand there might be concerns about the mechanisms here, but that's why this policy is so long, because it puts in a lot of protections to help both the accused and the accusers. And this is well thought out. And I do think this would be great for the city of Watertown. If we meet again to talk about the wording, I have some small concerns there and things that I would change, but conceptually, I think this is a great policy for Watertown in a way, as you know, section 7.1302 says, to provide public information and education, to provide a localized community approach of mediation and conciliation, and then provide enforcement if necessary. But the odds of it even going to the furthest extreme that this policy provides, I think is unlikely, considering how we would approach that.
Thank you. Council members, would anyone like to say anything? I would like input on this and feedback on specifically what it is that upsets or bothers people specifically, not just like wipe the whole thing out, because I think it's important. And we already have most of this for housing. This would expand it to include housing, employment, and public accommodations. Councilman Hoyer?
In a lot of ways, when I read through it, the mechanisms involved and kind of what it seems to stand for conceptually, it reminds me a lot of just a victim's advocate. For those that have been in the military, you would be familiar with what that is, but just giving somebody a private area where they can actually safely discuss something with a party that's going to be amenable to it, and then kind of inform them of their rights. And this functions, of course, on more than one level. If you read through it, it's not just LGBTQ plus. I mean, it's all encompassing. I do think it needs some massaging for sure. Really big ordinances in any form of law need some massaging. This one definitely does. But I do think its purpose is important. I don't think we should just dismiss it because it's going to be complex. But I would just say that we'd be willing to take the time and do the work on it and make sure if we do go down this route, we do it right. It does serve a purpose and it does help the community overall if we so pursue it. I mean, we don't live in a world free of racism. We don't live in a community free of discrimination. It does exist. But, you know, not all of us go through it. So sometimes we think it's not there. But, yeah, I would just say have an open mind to it and let's give it a fair discussion when that comes. So.
Absolutely. Thank you. Councilman Lallam?
Matt, have you reached out to the Attorney General's office to just have him do a quick overview of it by chance?
I guess that's not how that process works. But they, you know, we can request an Attorney General's opinion, which is usually a longer process. That they don't just look over stuff for municipal attorneys. I wish that was the case, but no, I have not.
Well, concerns I have is if we're overstepping what the state statutes are and or federal statutes as well. So I just want to make sure that we're staying within our guidelines compared to going to what the state, overstepping what the state has.
So I could speak to that. You know, there's a specific state statute that permits the adoption by municipalities or counties of human relations commissions. And, you know, the actual, you know, the protected classes that are spelled out are consistent with the Federal Civil Rights Act. Now, recently, the Supreme Court in June issued a decision, the U.S. Supreme Court issued a decision that essentially said that the word sex, as it states in the Civil Rights Act, encompasses gender identity as well as sexual orientation. And so with that ruling, the state law cannot be more restrictive than federal civil rights law. So therefore, our state law automatically has become more expansive, in my opinion. And therefore, by adding this language in our ordinance, I don't see a conflict with state law.
Thank you. Councilman Vilhauer?
I don't know if what we've got here is a good ordinance, and it is ordinance, not a resolution. I don't know if what we've got here is good, bad, or otherwise. I was the one that threw this idea out a couple of months ago at the flag discussion concerning taking a look at this. I was thinking that we'd be putting together a group of people that would look to see what the issues are within the community, what the problems are. I wasn't envisioning jumping from that to a 15 or 16 page ordinance in one fell swoop. And that's a concern that I've got with this.
We have the Fair Housing Ordinance in place already, which protects in the same way and actually has a committee established just for housing. And so, I mean, that's a pretty lengthy ordinance as well. And I mean, a lot of this just exists and you can't get rid of it. Some of it just has to be there. And I mean, I don't like having it be big and cumbersome and difficult to understand. I would like it to be as streamlined as possible. And to that end, if there's any confusion at all, I would like to eliminate that and by, you know, honing down our language in any way that we can. So I'm fine vetting this out. There is a committee that's been established, they've met, and it's got 4 council members on it. And you want me to remind you?
No, I mean, I know who's on the committee. I guess my point is we're making the assumption or jumping to the assumption that we do have a problem within the community, and that's the part that I'm not ready to necessarily accept. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't, but that was my point a couple of months ago, is to try to figure out what the issues are within the community.
I think we do have an issue. I'd let Brett talk about that.
Yeah, just from my perspective, had I been discriminated against based what I believe on my sexual orientation, at this point I probably would not have made a complaint in the city of Watertown, just from my perception of what the community has been. And so it's really hard to study this issue and find these people, because that would, one, require them to come out, which a lot of individuals aren't ready to do yet. And then second, make that accusation. So it's a very nuanced issue, which is why I'm urging the council to err on the side of protection as opposed to not having protection. Councilwoman Manti mentioned that, the complaint came to her and she had to really scramble and dig deep to find something, how to even deal with this. I would prefer that we take a proactive approach and say, so that the next time this does happen, and by promoting this ordinance, that maybe could inspire more people to come forward with their stories. So we can actually say, oh, well, we actually do have something in place for you that might encourage more people to come out and, again, make these kinds of claims and make our community better. I don't see pushing this off and not doing anything as helping the community, really, because it is such a hard issue to study, really, or to know about because of the implications that it would have.
I guess my only comment to that, Brett, and Mayor and Council, is that when I made the comments a couple months ago, it wasn't only the sexual orientation issue that I was addressing at that time. I also pointed out, Black Lives Matter was a hot topic and still is. Native Americans in our community or in our area. I mean, it was broader than just a sexual orientation issue that I felt we should be looking at.
And this is broad. This is not just about sexual orientation. This is about all kinds of discrimination. Councilwoman Manti?
Yeah, I just wanted to extend on the comment that Brett made about discrimination. And in my feeling, and there has been some, and things that I've dealt with include mental health, socioeconomic, and some of those others. And one can extrapolate fairly quickly that if those kinds of discrimination exist, it's not a huge leap to think that there aren't other kinds of discrimination existing. And it is hard. What I used essentially for those folks is my ability to go through windows and doors and hoops and whatever by finding the right place, the right government agency, or the right law that would help them and help their case. They don't necessarily have the ability to open those doors or to find that information or go through that. And so, I totally support, and I've said this before, making it a good law. And if that takes a little massaging, that's fine. But the mayor is right in the sense that this is making our community much more aware. It's giving options for people who might be in a marginalized group. And I can tell you that just having been a woman and growing up in the eras that I did with my career, things like that, I faced discrimination a lot of times. And I'm what people would consider to be a middle-class elderly white woman, I guess. But I think that that to me says a lot, that the fact that I've dealt with it here in Watertown, I've experienced it all over the country, not just in Watertown. So I just want people to think about that if it's certain things are already happening, it's not a far leap to say that these other things aren't either, whether it be housing or careers or public access to services, any of those kind of things. So I want to make that strong point, as well as the fact that we are going to develop a good law, and I think we can. And I just don't want to see it dragged on for 6-8 months, because I think that's not doing anybody any services. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else? Well, please take a look, and if you find sections of this proposed ordinance to be offensive in any way, I want to hear about it. That's not the intent, and I don't want to create any new laws. I simply want to make our community more accessible and welcoming to everyone. Brett?
Yeah, just to echo my sentiments and maybe perhaps provide a recent example. I'm sure you all heard about the story in Webster, and subsequent news coverage uncovered, we now know hate crimes in South Dakota do not encompass sexual orientation or gender identity. So there aren't as many protections already in state law that some lawmakers may think. And so that's a case where something happened to an individual and they weren't able to find recourse under that statute because of it. That's the kind of thing I want to prevent. I don't want someone to get hurt or be discriminated against and then have to come and find out that there's nothing that would encompass or protect them under that in an easily accessible way in our community, in a way that isn't having to go through the court system, which is its own difficult process. This would at least put those protections in place and, support our city's affirmation and the city council's affirmation to preventing discrimination in a way that promotes a more inclusive community.
Thank you. All right, we're going to move on. Last item on the regular agenda is review of the continued necessity of resolution number 20-15, declaring an emergency during the pandemic outbreak of the novel coronavirus, COVID-19, and providing for responsive measures related to the operations of the city and the protection of public health. And we review this at every council meeting. If there's an update to be given, I will say we've been hanging in there with our case count. I think we're at 19 right now, active cases in Cottington County, which is where we've been for weeks. We go down to 18, then we go up to 20, and we're hovering around there. In our region that utilizes our healthcare facilities, we have 39 active cases. Same thing. We've been higher, we've been lower. We're kind of been hanging in there for the last few weeks. We seem to be maintaining. So I don't know, personally, I don't know of any reason that we would want to change anything, but I will entertain any discussion by the council if they would like to.
I've got a question. I see the local unified command team has scheduled a meeting for next Monday. Anything in particular driving that, or just a midsummer review of where we're at?
Partially that. It's partially some of the medical places have been inundated with phone calls, and they're wondering if it's time to reenact the phone tree. That's one of the reasons. Back to school is coming, and we would expect there might be something going on with that, and just want to understand what everybody's doing and how they're all going, just kind of touching base. Anyone else? All right, we'll move on with no action on that. Is there any old business? Any new business? Any liaison member reports? Councilman Villar?
I reported here a while back about trying to get together with a group of a contingent from our council as well as Watertown Municipal Utility Board and applicable staff. We have sent out, or I put together an agenda they want to see as far as items to discuss. I sent that out last Thursday morning. To date, have not heard back from anyone from the Utilities Board or staff, but I'll continue to pursue that.
Thank you. Any other liaison reports? All right. Any announcements? Budget hearing. We do have a budget hearing scheduled for, I believe, August 11th. Is that correct, Kristen?
That's correct. August 11th.
Yeah.
Starts at 4 p.m.
So I'm planning to present the budget the same way that it was presented last year in a PowerPoint form, and I will go through the changes, and the department heads will either be online or present if you have any questions. So, any other announcements? All right, we do have a need to go into executive session pursuant to SDCL 1-25-2 to discuss and consult with legal counsel on contractual matters, as well as confidential information for economic development purposes. So need a motion. Motion by Lallam, second by Holeen. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries, and we are in executive session.